I don't know what you call a lady version of a pimp, but she is a lady
Do
pimp.
you want me to Google that?
Yeah.
Fun. Okay. Oh, okay. A procurer, colloquially called a pimp if male or a madam if female.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who love to explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are covering Crown of Midnight, chapters 7 through 13. I don't think this is a hot take because I'm pretty sure that you likely made the same conclusion that I did,
Oh,
but it's a wild, big connection. So we'll
okay.
see if it ends up being the same.
Ooh.
But aside from that, I am obviously dying to talk about Celaena's super sleuthing missions with not one, but two gorgeous men. So let's get into it. As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 7 through 13 specifically, but it is likely that references to Throne of Glass will come up as well. If you have not read Throne of Glass, please pause here, go catch up, and then jump back in when you're caught up. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. Next week's Crown of Midnight episode will cover chapters 14 through 19. And then, in addition, of course, we are continuing with our House of the Dragon season 1 recaps. So far, we have covered 8 episodes. And by the time this episode comes out, we're literally going to be down to a week.
Like less than 2
Might be
weeks.
less than 2 weeks. Okay, so it's close. We're getting real close. And then last but not least, Addison, where are we at with our Onyx Storm countdown?
All right. Today, the day we're recording this, it is June 3rd, and there are 232 days until Onyx Storm is released.
Yay!
Woo!
Okay, so that is all for our housekeeping updates. The general structure of our episodes will remain the same. So first we will have our book report to summarize the chapters. Next, we will dive into an analysis of each chapter where we ask questions and offer our crazy predictions and theories. And last but not least, we will also share our favorite moments from the chapters covered. Also, before we move on, we've had some really wonderful comments, just a couple on our YouTube channel specifically that made us really happy. So if you are the subscriber, or I don't know, maybe you don't subscribe to us, but you can if you want to. And then, but thank you to the person that left the comment. It was really so nice. And we just like to hear from you guys that you enjoy getting the recaps and seeing what details we pick up on and stuff, because obviously we have never read this series before. It's brand new to us. So we don't know anything. We have no idea what's going on. So we're just out here spewing thoughts, ideas. It's whatever. Sometimes we're right. Sometimes we're definitely not. So I'm glad that people find that enjoyable. But more importantly, we're just happy to be able to provide fun and engaging content for you guys. So,
Yes.
as long as you like it, we'll keep going.
And even if you don't, we're very persistent and we'll probably continue anyway.
We're going to continue.
Yes, to piggyback off Lorraine, thank you guys so much. The most recent comment, I read it like 10 times, it made me so happy. And most importantly, what I liked about it was that the person agreed with me and not Lorraine. And I really, really enjoyed that.
I am waiting. I think as we're going to read, we may find there's more things that I picked up on in that first book that we didn't have any confirmation on, but as we go on,
it'll happen for you. It'll happen. We've got 6.5 more books to go. So you're bound to get something right.
I have been right about stuff. It just wasn't bad.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyways, that is all. Now we can finally start the episode. So Addison, please give us the book report.
Happily. Chapter 7. After Celaena's encounter with Mort, she awakes the next day feeling uneasy and unresolved. While much of the future feels uncertain to Celaena, she knows two things for sure. She must uncover whatever is threatening the castle and by proxy Aurelia, and that she needs to speak to Archer Finn ASAP. Despite Celaena's disdain for the cold weather, she and Chaol take to the streets of Rifthold. Celaena and Chaol exchange witty banter as they wait to accidentally run into Archer Finn. Celaena runs into Archer, literally, just as she planned. They share a brief exchange where Celaena can't quite tell if the wariness in Archer's eyes is because of who she works for or because he has something to hide. They make plans to have dinner the next evening. After their encounter with Archer, Chaol can't help but feel a little jealous and unsettled. He teases Celaena about Archer's pet name for her and tries to lighten Selena's mood after the mention of Sam puts her on edge. They make their way arm in arm back to the glass castle. Chapter 8. Chaol informs Celaena that the king has ordered her to assist with guard duty at the state dinner that night. A very hangry Celaena reluctantly agrees. The dinner passes without anything noteworthy happening, and Celaena observes with great distaste all of the pampered lords of the king's council who bled other kingdoms dry so they could pay for all the gold and jewels flaunted about in the room. As Celaena watches on, she notices Dorian and Roland flirting with some pretty young courtiers. Celaena feels it in her gut that something is off with Roland, and she resolves to warn Dorian to be careful around Roland. Dorian is in his feels big time. Needing a break from the painfully boring state dinner, he makes his way out of the Great Hall. Celaena catches up with him. She tries to warn him about her concerns regarding Roland, but Dorian brushes her off. The conversation quickly becomes about what happened between them, but Celaena shuts that down quick. Celaena decides it's time to pay her poisoner a little visit. Celaena is in rough shape, but greets Celaena with her black eyes gleaming.
Black eyes.
Black eyes. Chapter 9. Celaena wants information from Celaena about Roland. Celaena questions her, but Celaena, clearly afflicted with a touch of madness, gives away nothing. She attempts to make a bargain with Celaena. If Celaena can get her out, she might, and I mean might, tell her what she knows about Roland. Just as Celaena is about to leave the dungeons, Celaena begins talking in confusing and dark riddles that leave Celaena feeling nothing but unease and dread. That morning, a snowstorm blows through Rifthold. Celaena, unable to track Archer or run with Chaol in the storm, invites Nehemia to what I affectionately refer to as the Breakfast Club. Nehemia is outraged by the treatment of Celaena. Reflecting on the state of the kingdom, Nehemia recalls a time when the courts were places of honor and respect, especially the court in Terrasen. Nehemia wonders aloud if such a court could ever exist again. Celaena quickly changes the subject and asks Nehemia if there's any news of the king's plans. Nehemia only has to offer that Roland has been appointed to handle her, and she is worried about the worsening conditions of the Calcula work camp. As Nehemia talks, Fleetfoot shoots her shot and swipes a piece of bacon off the breakfast tray and stares Celaena down as she chows down.
I love Fleetfoot.
Me too. I get so excited. I like that she stared at Celaena. She was like, what's she gonna do, you know? All right. Chapter 10. Dorian and Chaol make their way into the castles and the kennels to avoid Holland, who was recently pulled from school by Queen Georgina. As they walk, they discuss Holland's recent arrival to the Glass Castle and Celaena's upcoming mission with Archer Finn. Celaena prepares for dinner with Archer, and she looks fine in a risque scarlet dress. She runs into Chaol in the hallway, and he is not okay. He can't get over how hot she is, and also the fact that she's going to see Archer Finn wearing that. Celaena teases Chaol about not seeing him until the morning, and Chaol is not for it. Celaena and Archer have a deliciously tantalizing exchange, but before things heat up too much, the server shows up with an immensely interesting bowl of soup. After dinner, Celaena ends up in Archer's carriage and he invites her inside, but Celaena pumps the brakes on that hard and instead hits him with a verbal bucket of ice water and asks him, "Do you hate your life?" If that wasn't bad enough, she then takes the opportunity to tell him that the king has sent her there to kill him.
Yikes.
That was so funny. He's like, "You want to come inside, baby?" And she was like, "Do you hate your
I want to
life?"
kill you. 0 to 100 real quick.
Or like 100 to 0.
Yeah, 100 to 0.
Yeah, because I was
Reverse.
like, "Ooh, baby."
Uno
And then I was
reverse.
like, that went bad. That was ugly. Chapter 11. Archer rockets to the other side of the carriage and immediately begins begging for his life. Celaena tells Archer that the king suspects he is part of a rebel movement. Archer denies any involvement and sings like a canary. He tells her of a growing rebel movement in Rifthold to overthrow the king and put Aelin Galathinius on the throne. Celaena makes Archer the same deal she has made all her other targets. Die right now or fake your death and disappear. Archer picks the latter, and Celaena gives him until the end of the month to get his affairs in order. Archer tells Celaena he can help get her access to more info at a party tomorrow night. Celaena warns him to be discreet or things will not end well for him. Celaena returns from the castle and pays a visit to Chaol. She tells him almost everything she learned from Archer, and he tells her to be careful. This initially angers Celaena, but Chaol admits in a moment of vulnerability that he can't help himself. He truly cares for her, and he always will.
Love.
It's love. Oh my God, the next set of chapters with them, for real. Chapter 12. It's time for the masquerade party. Celaena arrives on the arm of the handsome Archer Finn. Archer directs her to Davis's office, and they quickly separate. Celaena searches the office and can't seem to find anything of note until she comes across a mysterious book with a word mark on it. Suddenly, she hears the lock click. With no chance of escape through the window because of her massive but beautiful dress, Celaena instead turns on the waterworks. She pretends to be a young woman whose betrothed had just abandoned her. Just as Celaena thinks she's in the clear, Davis whips out a dagger and slices Celaena's arm. Celaena has the upper hand, but not for long. Davis reveals that the dagger was poisoned with Gloriella, a paralytic poison that Celaena knows all too well. She manages to get the upper hand and kills Davis. But there's no time to waste. She must make her way back to the glass castle before it's too late. By the word, she manages to make it to Chaol's room just in time to whisper one word to him before she collapses. Gloriella. Chapter 13. It was one of the longest nights of Chaol's life. We see the night through his perspective, and what we see does not look good. To Chaol's relief, there was only a small scratch on her forearm. But then the realization hits him. Gloriella. He immediately calls for rest to get a healer as discreetly as possible. Celaena spends the next few hours vomiting repeatedly. Celaena finally falls into a deep sleep, and Chaol is able to relax a little. Celaena finally wakes, and although she feels lousy as hell, she is okay. Chaol questions her about the events of that night and reveals that he will not tell the king, and in fact, even went as far as burning her dress to hide any evidence. Chaol is upset with Celaena, but ultimately relieved that she is okay. Celaena is comforted by Chaol's presence and realizes despite the poisonous haze that clouded her mind, she somehow ended up where she knew she would be safest, with Chaol.
Aww.
I know.
So cute.
What a nice way to end this set of chapters. I mean, in a way, I was like, okay, this is good. I'm happy.
It was nice. I don't think it's going to work for either of them, but we will take the romance that we can get for now,
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the summaries. Let's dive into the analysis. So starting with chapter 7. Celaena awoke before dawn, and she's reflecting and thinking about her time in Elena's tomb.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the talking door knocker that she met. And she's realizing that, unfortunately, this was not just a dream. It did, in fact, happen in real life. One of the first things that stood out to me immediately is that Celaena awoke before dawn with a pounding headache. So back at Throne of Glass, we know that Lady Caltaine had horrible headaches whenever she interacted with Parrington because of the evil magic they were using on her. Now, obviously, this could just be coincidental of her just not getting very much sleep, but I just wanted to note it in case it has some significance in some kind of capacity. After that, she then reflects on the fact that Elena had warned her to uncover the source of power and that she has to find it, referring to whatever the king is doing. I noted this in the last episode where I believed it's possible the king is sourcing his power from a particular thing or place. This just felt like extra confirmation because she took time to note that. And so I'm officially on the lookout for something or some location of some sort that the king could tap into for this power that he's using.
Yeah, I do wonder because it does seem like just what we know about the glass castle and also the structure underneath it, it's ancient, right? Elena and Gavin's tomb is there. It's 1,000 years old. And it does call into question, what else do we not know about the castle and the structure beneath? Remember in Throne of Glass, when Celaena first enters the library, Chaol says there's rumors to be a second library underneath. We know that there's a very advanced tunnel system underneath. So I wonder even if there's a source of magic or power or something even underneath the glass castle.
I still, again, find it so crazy that nobody has found their tombs. Like, where did they think Gavin and Elena's tomb has been this whole time? You know, did they just make a separate burial site for her?
I mean, you do kind of have to chalk it up to the fact that Elena and Gavin were alive over 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years is a long time. People forget things. And you have to remember, too, the king destroyed a lot of information, books, and also people who may have generational knowledge. So it's very possible that maybe they did know, but because of the massacre of anyone related to magic, that information was lost.
Interesting.
Or maybe the king does know and we don't know that he knows. I don't think he does, but it's possible.
Yeah, I do want to know what the king knows. Obviously, we keep saying this, but
seriously, what is he up to?
Don't
even get me started on that. I also thought it was interesting and kind of funny in her reflection of her interaction with Moore and the message from Elena specifically, that she's so reluctant to agree to it. She's trying to talk herself into it, but also out of it. I think she even says, well, I just have to find it. I don't have to actually do anything about it. And I was like, really, Celaena? You're going to go through all the effort to find the evil and then you're just going to, leave? I don't know. It's kind of funny and also makes me edgy, I guess, that she's so opposed to getting involved. But then I know she can't help it. But why? Why doesn't she want to help? I feel like this is a continued theme throughout the books thus far. She's reluctant in Throne of Glass to get involved. And I think that's becoming really prevalent in Crown of Midnight thus far, especially in her conversations with Nehemia. Because both Nehemia and even Dorian really tried to get involved in the politics and make things better. And Celaena is just like, I'm here for me and myself and my freedom. And I don't care about anything else. I kind of get it, but it kind of bothers me.
Well, Moore calls her out. He's like, you're selfish.
Yeah, dude, he is vicious. He is vicious.
Sassy little door knocker.
I would love to see him and Philippa go head to head.
Oh my gosh, that'd be hilarious. All right, let's go shopping, says Celaena to Chaol. Just kidding, they're not going shopping. But Celaena gets dressed in stylish clothes and heads off to the city, Chaol in tow, to conveniently bump into Archer. Their plan is to linger outside a tea court called the Willows, where Archer is dining, and wait for him to leave. I have a few notes about the information we learn that are not necessarily in order, but I kind of group them by category. So, first off, this whole spy expedition thing was just really funny to me.
Yeah.
Because you've got Chaol, who's just being a suspicious grump. And then all their banter that's going on between him and Celaena is just very cute. And I loved it. I have a snippet of their banter. So Celaena says, do not say anything to him. Leave the talking and charming to me. Chaol raised his eyebrows. So I'm just decoration. And then Celaena is like, be grateful I consider you a worthy accessory.
I also just love that she told him to wear normal clothes and he shows up in a black tunic. In a plain black outfit. It's like really, but you know what? It's
like a bodyguard fit.
Yes.
It looks
nice. So well for his character. Can you imagine him wearing any other color other than black? Because I should No.
What color is their actual uniform? Is it red with the what? Is it black still?
With red? With a golden wyvern, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's funny that you picked up on that quote because I actually highlighted it a different one. I liked when she said, this is the part where you shut your mouth and pretend to be a woolly-headed bit of decoration. Shouldn't be too hard for you. I just like that she used the word woolly.
Woolly-headed. Yeah, I don't even know what that means.
I think it's like a cotton-headed Ninny Muggins.
Oh, okay.
From Elf, you don't get that reference? Now I'm embarrassed.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah. People don't come for me. I've watched it a couple times, but I'm not an Elf fanatic. It's a good movie, don't get me wrong, but I'm not like diehard. I love Elf. Remembering
I'm going to come for you. I watch that movie every Christmas because it's hilarious. It's one of the best Christmas movies.
It is funny, but I'm also not like repeat movie watcher. I can watch a movie like maybe 2, max 3 times. And then after that, I'm like, okay, I'm done with this.
I feel like at Christmas time, it's different. Okay, but anyway, we digress. Although I am going to say in our next bet, whoever wins gets to pick a Christmas movie.
A Christmas
make
movie.
The other person watch. Yes. I don't care that it's this summer. I'll make you watch it.
Christmas in July.
That sounds good.
Anyways, okay. The other thing that I find really funny about the whole interaction is obviously that Kale is very jealous of Archer. We know by now that Kale is definitely succumbing to his feelings for Celaena. So
Oh,
it's really funny to like read about how he's sizing Archer up
mm,
and getting all hot and bothered by them, you know? So,
yeah.
and then my second point. So, Allison, you mentioned this last episode, but we do get confirmation that Archer is, in fact, just a courtesan. Well, not
Mhm.
just, he's a very elite courtesan
True.
and very beautiful and scrumptious sounding
Scrumptious. That's a good word. I
at that.
like that. Scrumptious.
So on page 59, we learned that he'd become the top male courtesan in Rifthold. But the more notable description to me was this. It was hard to look away from Archer, who had been and still was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. Not handsome, beautiful. His skin glowed golden, even in the height of winter, and his green eyes, gods above, and words save me. Not only was that an excellent description to
Mhm.
bring forth the imagery, but
Mhm.
my mind immediately went, Archer is Fae.
What?
I don't know, something about the
No.
way, because there's just something about the way he was described that made it sound like he's abnormally beautiful in a way that's beyond the normal human. She had a line where he could go both ways, right? If you're taking it literally, she's referencing the fact that he's very beautiful because she said something about your charms aren't gonna work on me. You're gonna need to do more than the looks. Or well, let me just find.
They're having dinner and she says, you know,
Yeah.
your tricks of the trade won't work on me. And then he says, if I'd been using them, we'd already have left.
Oh, yes, that it was that one. Yes,
Mhm.
and so it could mean nothing at all. But his skin glowed golden. I feel like that's a weirdly specific way to be describing something, unless they're just referencing a skin tone of some sort to give you a better
Yeah.
idea. But I don't know. He sounds suspiciously too beautiful. And who do we know is very, very beautiful?
The Fae.
Fae.
The Fae.
Fae men.
True.
So,
Absolutely agree that the description is very evocative of how Fae are described in a lot of fantasy books.
mhm,
However, the problem for me is that it's very contradictory to everything we learn about Archer's background. He was an orphan when he was 12. A
mhm,
madam basically picked him up and was like, I'll train you to be a courtesan. There's many conversations which we'll talk about as we progress in the episode about how he feels trapped. He owes Madame Clarissa debt. He's not free. And if someone was an immortal fae, usually fae are powerful. Why would he continue to live the life of a courtesan that's indebted to a madam? It just, his background and his lifestyle doesn't align with him being a fae. So I'm not going to discount it, but I'm going to say maybe not.
I know it's obviously far-fetched, but
Yeah.
this is oddly he's a little too beautiful to be normal,
True.
you know?
He is described very seductively, and you're really
Mhm.
drawn in by him. Honestly, for a minute, I was going to ship Celaena and Archer. When he was like, do you want to go inside? I was like, yes, girl, say yes, go in there.
The whole time in the background, though, I was like, you guys met when she was 13 and you were already sizing each other up. And this man is how old?
I'm going
Actually, I
to
don't
ignore
know how
that.
old he is. Yeah, I'm going to ignore it too, obviously. But but I did have that intrusive thought of she's too young, even though I
Yeah.
don't actually know how old he is. But, anyways.
I did find it interesting in that brief snippet of conversation they have outside the tea room, a couple of things. The first is that he asks her if Arabin knows if she's back. And
Mhm.
Celaena says that she would be surprised if he didn't know. And so, as always, where's Arabin Hamill? What is he doing? Because I agree. But I thought it was interesting that Archer knows
New.
Arabin. Well, we know that because he trained at the Assassin's Keep. So then it led me to the question of what is his relationship status with Arabin now? Does he have a continued correspondence with him, or is it just a distant relation? Because then as the conversation progresses, he also tells Celaena, I heard about Sam. I'm so sorry what happened. And I do wonder how he knows about Sam. Because on the
Mhm.
one hand, I'm like, maybe that was a publicized thing. It was a pretty public murder, but it seems like Archer knows more details about it specifically, especially in
Mhm.
regards to Celaena, which we know from the first book that nobody knows Celaena's identity. They just know
Mhm.
her as Adelin's assassin, right? That implies to me that people may have heard about Sam, but not Celaena, which means that Archer would know more intimate details about everything that happened. So I want to know how he knows.
Oh, I am so suspicious of Archer, to be honest. Once we got into later chapters, I was like, math ain't mathin'. I don't
Well,
like this.
okay, my spidey sense started tingling. I don't want to talk about it here. We'll wait till we get to that chapter. But at first I was like, ooh, Archer. And then I was like, Archer.
Archer.
Something's hinky. I don't trust him. I don't like him. Something's up. But we'll talk about it when we get there. But I'm glad you
Yes,
said it.
yes, I agree. I had exactly the same questions when he made that line about does Erebin know you're back? He has eyes everywhere. I am getting concerned for Celaena because as soon as he's asking that, if she's already suspicious of the fact that Erebin was the one that betrayed her, then
Mhm.
obviously if he has eyes on the city at all times, he has to know she's back. And if
He
so,
has to.
what's its plan? Is he gonna come after her? Is she in danger? It just spurs a lot of questions about her
Yeah.
safety and other people that may be involved in Erebin's network that may
Mhm.
come after her in some capacity.
I think that's a totally valid concern. I'm just going to do some wild speculation here, just based off what information we've given about Erebin. Erebin strikes me as the kind of character who is not sentimental, right? And he's not necessarily cold, but he's very calculating. And he only does things that serve him. And as long as someone serves their purpose or has the potential to serve a purpose in the future, he'll keep them around. He gives
Mm-hmm.
Littlefinger vibes from Game of Thrones.
Mm.
So I feel that Arabin is probably in this constant state of existence where he is evaluating what is this person's worth? What is their value to me? What can I get out of them? Are they better off dead or alive? Does it serve me best? That's my impression of his character. And I feel that for Celaena, it is more beneficial to him for her to continue to live, especially living in the glass castle and working for the king of Otterlin. I think Arabin, assuming he knows about what she's up to, I think he looks at her and thinks that is a good ace in the pocket when I need help or I need a favor or I can use her to manipulate a situation to my advantage. I am a little concerned, but I feel like Celaena's position of importance in the glass castle as a king's champion gives her a lot of cover and protection.
Yeah, as you're saying that, it does spark this idea of Arabin has no allegiance to anybody, right? He's a free agent. He's
Agreed.
going to work for whoever is going to pay him the most, basically. And
Mhm.
now, given everything that we've learned in this set of chapters, what if Arabin's been looped into something somehow in connection with the king? AKA, that's why he betrayed her in the first place. This is why now that she's coming back, because again, we're gonna talk about it when we get there, but Davis's finding of her in that situation was way too suspicious. The fact that it was
Yes.
Gloriella, there's way too many things that are so similar to her betrayal and
Mhm.
everything that I'm like, I got a lot of flags. And obviously, Arabin was
True.
somebody that she suspects betrayed her. The king doesn't really like Celaena, but he finds her worth keeping for now because he
True.
needs her to do certain things for her.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean he has any permanent allegiance to her. He would easily get rid of her if he really wanted to, right?
Right.
I don't know. I got a lot of questions.
Something's going on. We know
Something's
that for
going
sure.
on. Mhm. Okay, so moving along in this chapter, Celaena and Archer agree to meet for dinner so they can chat further. Then they go their separate ways. And now we have some jealous Kale. So Kale
Mm.
questions her about her relationship with Archer. Because he's just like, Lena. Like,
I know. She even calls him out, like, that's what you want to ask me about that
mhm.
conversation.
Yep.
Yep.
I just thought that was really funny. But obviously, Celaena reassures him that her closeness to Archer is just useful because she can spy and get information about the rebel movement.
Mhm.
I did think it was cute when Celaena says, I absolutely hate it when he calls me Lena, don't you? A smile tugged at his lips, along with a flicker of relief. I feel like that was Celaena throwing him a bone in a way
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
like, look, I can see that you're jealous, but this didn't mean anything.
Don't be.
Yeah, don't be jealous.
I thought it was funny in that section of the chapter. This is the first time where Kale was starting to give off just a tiny bit of shadow daddy vibes, like morally gray, because Kale has always been so buttoned up and honorable and proper and loyal.
Mm.
And you got to get a little more insight into his emotional state. So actually, I have two quotes to support my moderately shadow daddy Gale. He says, during the whole exchange, all he'd really been able to think about was how much he wanted to slam Archer's pretty face against the stone building. And I was like,
He has
whoa.
a lot of violent
That's
thoughts.
kind of he does. He does. Okay. And then he also thinks part of him he knew should be ashamed for finding some relief in the fact that she was going to kill him. He was a better man than that. And he certainly wasn't the territorial type. But honestly, I'm for it. And it really does kind of give Shadow Daddy vibes where it's like he's a good guy, but a little violent. And especially when it comes to his woman.
Yeah, that's true. Also, later at the final chapter, when he's questioning and trying to figure out everything that goes on, he's like, I'm
Yeah.
glad that she killed him because if she hadn't, I would have, you know? I was like,
Yes,
oh,
I wrote
okay.
that down. I wrote that down for that chapter. I was like, more Shadow Daddy evidence.
I really feel like he's undergoing a very large shift. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, not only with his
Yes.
feelings to Celaena, but I think in association with Celaena, just his overall identity about like who he supports, what he's loyal to, what he wants to fight for. You can see that there's already a pretty significant shift happening. So,
Oh, absolutely.
so moving on to chapter 8. We start off this chapter with a state dinner in the Great Hall that Celaena has been ordered to assist in guarding by the king. Celaena originally did not want to be there, but she remembers Elena's warning and realizes it would be suspicious of her not to attend. So she is like, okay, yeah, I'll be there. She's sitting against a pillar, picking her nails with her knife. And I'm like, that's so.
I know.
If nobody knew you were an assassin before, they definitely do now.
Okay, thank you. That's such a badass assassin thing to do.
I know she's always lounging, you know, in her chairs and stuff.
Yes.
But as Celaena watches the dinner guests, she's focusing on Dorian and Roland in particular, and then also watching Kale, as Dorian notes.
And most importantly, she's admiring all the food. I even wrote a quote because it was so funny to me. The book says, it took all of Celaena's self-control to keep from sprinting to the long table in the center of the room and horking down the food right off the plates of the gathered councilmen and preening nobility. And I don't know why, but the word horking was so funny and alien to me. I was like, what the hell does that mean? Obviously, I use my context clues, but I actually did look it up just in case anybody else thought
Like,
that was a weird word.
shoveling food into your mouth.
It means to eat hastily or greedily, to gobble. And I don't know why, but I feel like Celaena is horking food 24/7. Homegirl
She's
loves
always
food.
eating food. Oh my gosh. And then she loves chocolate. She's like, I might steal some chocolates from this ball later. And I was like, whoa, okay.
I know. I like that even Archer is like, well, this party has the best pastry chef in Rifthold. And Celaena's like, yes.
Score. Cha-ching. Okay. But anyways, getting back to the plot. So she focuses on Roland in particular because she really just gets a bad feeling about Roland. And we see that she's very worried about Dorian. She even wonders Dorian can't possibly like Roland. So there's a thought that she has about Roland. There was something about Roland's emerald eyes that made her want to pull Dorian as far away from him as possible. She had ended things with him romantically, but she still cared for him. So we've mentioned the good versus evil magic associated with colors. And emerald is a shade of green.
Oh my gosh, Lorraine.
So
That was such a good catch. I didn't even pick up on that. And Dorian's eyes are blue.
yes, and always jewels, right? And
Yes.
remember the forest and the jewel colors? Like
Yes. Yes. And I think it's in this set of chapters. I think Kale is looking at Celaena and he says something about her turquoise eyes.
yes.
So again, shade of blue. Okay. And also a gem. Ooh, that's
And
interesting.
Nehemia's turquoise, right? So Celena's turquoise eyes match Nehemia's turquoise situation.
Yeah.
She had the turquoise word marks. Yeah, and shades of blue. So I don't know, but very suspicious.
Yeah.
Anyone, obviously, that is associated with the king. can't be good news. But Celaena also believes that Dorian likely doesn't know what the king is up to and prays that Dorian would be a better king than his father in the future.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, Celaena, you don't know what the king's up to either. So you better figure that out.
Yeah.
Hurry up. I'm waiting.
I thought that specific thought that Selena has is interesting because it seems to be such a tonal shift from Throne of Glass. Because there are many, many times in Throne of Glass where she thinks about Dorian and how he's so kind and wonderful and different. And there's this element of confidence she has in Dorian that he'll be a better ruler than his father. And now it seems that it's shifted slightly. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that she thinks he's going to be horrible or anything, but she just doesn't quite have the confidence that she used to in Dorian and his ability to be a different ruler than the current king.
That's true. I feel like a little bit of her projecting too, because they have that spat where it's clear that she's mad at him because she thinks he couldn't get what he wanted in dating
Mhm.
her. But he's like, you never gave me a chance to explain myself, et cetera, et cetera. So she never really moved past this idea that he's just a pretty boy who is at the will of the king, more or less, or she just thinks that he
Right.
does whatever he's told to do. But
Mhm.
obviously, we as readers see more of Dorian's internal thoughts, so we know that he doesn't want to be that way. But they haven't reconciled that formally yet, or in a really clear
For
manner.
That's
So,
fair. I guess I'm thinking about the context of the perspective we get of Dorian, but Selene and Dorian haven't had the growth for her to come to that conclusion. So that's fair.
right. I feel like she has had that with Kaol in these chapters now, right?
Yeah,
Had that big
agreed.
fight slash the truth comes out and she's like, oh, that's what you meant. Sorry, my bad. And I'm like, why? Anyways, we'll get there when we get there. So as Celaena watches the guests, Dorian is also doing some looky look and he's watching Celaena. And we get some insights into his thoughts. First, we learn that Roland's mother is looking for him to find a rich lady to marry. So he was brought there by the king's council, but he's also there on a scouting mission for a wife, which I don't think Roland's very interested in finding a wife, but his mother wants him to marry. So
I think Roland is interested in one thing and one thing only.
that's true.
Ladies. All the ladies.
Ladies. As many
Single
ladies as
ladies,
possible.
married ladies, betrothed
Doesn't matter.
ladies.
Second, we learned that Dorian does not like Roland either, but is too polite to publicly express that because he is bound to duty and the social politics of court life, so to speak.
Mhm.
And then third, Dorian is big mad and jealous about Celaena's interest in Kael.
I actually wrote, Dorian is a jealous moron.
They both get very jealous over Celaena.
Well, I'm not going to say that's not true, but I feel the context of their jealousy is very different. I think Dorian is a whiny, jealous baby. And I think
What?
Kale is jealous. One, because Archer Finn is easily the most beautiful man alive. And two, it's sort of a protective jealousy because he doesn't trust Archer. I don't think his jealousy manifests in the same way that Dorian's does.
To be fair, on Dorian's side, though, Celaena and him were kind of dating. And then she's just like, no. Imagine this in real life. You're
Okay.
dating somebody,
Hmm.
the person that you're seeing cuts it off, but then they start having feelings for your friend. And now you got to watch your friend and this other person that you had something going on with. Because he's even like, you guys deny it, right? So he's aware of the fact that they're exchanging looks. It's pretty clear that there's feelings for each other, but neither of them will outright say it either. So they're both like, no, nothing's going on. When meanwhile, you're like, that's not true. I don't know how else to say this other than there's the what the fuck, you're dating my friend now kind of situation. They're not dating, but you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
jumped over to my friend next. You know what I mean?
Yes, but I mean, Selena and Dorian weren't that serious. They kissed like 3 times. There was never any kind of official conversation or anything. It was just kind of base exploratory. I don't know. I kind of see what you're saying, but
I think
didn't
just the
get
amount of time that they were
didn't get
spending, I could see why he thought that it was much more serious than it ended up being. Right.
that
But again,
fair.
they never had any kind of formal conversation. Selena's just having all these internal thoughts on her own. Dorian doesn't know about them. And then out of nowhere, she's like, bye, this isn't going to work. But now I'm going to get real flirty with your friend who is also supposed to protect him. It just gets convoluted, right? So
yeah. And it's a bit messy. I'll agree with that. I do have two questions about the jealousy thing. Okay,
yeah,
so the first is, do you feel that he's jealous because he still wants Celaena, or that he's jealous because Celaena never felt that way about him?
I think both can be true at the same time. I think he's also upset about his position, right? Because in his
Mhm,
mind, he thinks he lost her because of his role and what he is duty bound to be and do,
mhm,
which is true. Well, at least that's what she told him, which I think ultimately Selena just didn't have as strong of feelings for him as he did for her.
mhm,
But she didn't really say that. She just attributed it to the fact that he's the crown prince. He has a certain duty that he needs to do, and it just wouldn't logistically work for him to be dating the assassin who was employed by his father to kill people. So
mm. Okay.
I do think that he feels jealous of seeing Selena and Kale interact, right? I think you always get jealous. It's the same thing with your friend. If you have a best friend and your best friend starts hanging out with someone else, you're always going to be like, side eye.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Why
Okay.
are you hanging out with them?
Okay. So my second question in relation to this is, do you think that Dorian feels jealous that Celaena is interested in Kale and not him, because Dorian is the crown prince of Aurelia and Kale's just a captain of the guard? Kind of like, why would you be interested in him when you could have me? I'm much more desirable for many reasons.
I I can see why people think that, but I think that's the whole issue with him, right? That's
Mhm.
what everybody thinks on a shallow level of Dorian. It's the same
Mhm.
thing that Selena thinks too about him. But we see again through his internal thoughts that, I mean, sure, he has moments of playing the field, dating people because he could,
Right.
but he's gotten to a point now, he's matured, quote unquote, that he wants to have a more serious and meaningful relationship with people. He doesn't want people to just think of him as a pretty prince, right? He wants
Right.
to actually establish himself as somebody who is, what's the word that I'm looking for?
It's substantive
Yeah, he's just, yeah, substantive, like has actually
depth.
performs his role well and
Right.
is wise and has a strong character. He's more than a pretty face. Alrighty. After Dorian's thoughts, he is like, I'm out, and he decides to leave. Dorian exits and Selena watches him and she follows him out. And while she's running after him, she notices that he looks very jealous, angry, aka like he could splatter someone against a wall. Her words, not mine.
Mhm.
Dorian ignores this, but then says, if you have something to say, just say it. So this is when Selena tells him she doesn't trust Roland, citing that he's got little to lose and a lot to gain. That makes people dangerous, ruthless. He'll use you. And then this is where Dorian's truth comes out. He responds with the same way an assassin from Endovier used me to become King's champion.
Ouch.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Ish.
Yeah, it was pretty harsh.
Yeah.
But again, they have never really had these conversations, right? We know that they've had these thoughts because we,
Mhm.
as the reader, have access to them. But between the two of them, they've never come together to discuss any of these suspicions that they have. They have independent thoughts. They make a decision. They inform the other person of the decision, but never explain anything. Obviously, Selena gets upset about this. I don't have her specific response, but she denies that. And Dorian's final quote is, you know nothing about what I wanted. You didn't even give me a chance to tell you. And then he walks away. Well, Selena actually walks away first because she didn't want to give him the satisfaction of walking away. I just felt really bad for Dorian in that moment. He just wants to be loved. But I do wonder what he wanted to say to her.
Yeah. This whole conversation was interesting to me, not just content wise, but the emotion that's played out in this scene. Dorian seems so angry and so bitter. And again, I know I keep asking this in basically all of Dorian's scenes, but I have to ask every time. Do you feel that this is reasonable anger based on everything that's happened between them? Or it's an emotion that he had that's now being heightened because he's being manipulated like Caltaine? I even marked a quote where he thinks he opened his mouth so close to exploding he could have punched the nearest wall, but Celaena was already striding off. And that just seems like really aggressive word choice
Mm-hmm.
and feeling for him. The impression that I get in Throne of Glass is that Dorian, while he's pretty well trained in swordplay, etc., he's sort of a bookish person. He's not good at standing up to his father. He's a little more peaceful, I guess, is the vibe I get. And now all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden it's like he could splatter someone against the wall and he wanted to explode. And I'm like, where did this explosive anger come from? And it really makes me wonder if this is being exacerbated by being manipulated by evil magic. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not sure. It's still hard to tell if it comes to be that he's had the magic being used on him to influence his feelings. I would not be surprised. But
Yeah.
I do think that there is that core part of Dorian's character where he resents the duty that he has to follow because it restricts him from having the freedom to do what he actually wants to do.
Hmm.
So,
That's fair.
and in this case, it cost him, as far as he knows, that's the reason why it cost him,
His relationship with Celaena.
yeah, a relationship that he actually felt was meaningful to him personally,
Okay.
or that he felt was worth pursuing. So I don't know. It could go either way, but in either case, we do know that Dorian doesn't like that he is in this position as the crown prince and everything.
Fair
So
enough.
I didn't want to get into the details of the rest of the convo. Honestly, for me, when I read all of this, I felt there was a lot of them not fully explaining themselves. They're all just making assumptions. It just feels like
Hmm.
that teenager kind of, they probably think this and therefore now I'm mad. And
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like, no, nobody actually thought that. You just aren't talking to each other.
Yep.
So
Was like, oh, I was mad at you because you were mad at me. Well, I was mad at
mhm,
you because I thought you were mad at me. And I was like,
exactly.
wait, what are we mad about again? That kind of bullshit.
Nobody knows. Exactly. So I hope they work it out and clear the air. But we round out the end of this chapter with Celaena taking a trip down to the prison cells to visit Lady Caltaine. She's back, baby. Sort
I
of.
love Lady. Well, sort of in rough shape. My note about
Yeah.
this part was Caltaine is in rough, all caps shape. That's it.
Oh, she is not doing well. I feel really bad
No,
for her.
me too. Well, I mean, well, no, I do because I was gonna say she did poison Celaena, but I genuinely feel, although she may not have liked Celaena,
She
she
wouldn't have
wouldn't have
actually
poisoned
done
her.
that. Yeah,
No.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
how I felt. Because then she got blamed for everything. And now she's in this cold, shitty prison cell. She's not being fed. She's not being bathed. Sound like really deplorable conditions to be in. So,
Yeah. It sounds like we should move to the next chapter so we can talk more about
oh,
it.
yeah. Chapter 9. I felt like this was a pretty key chapter. We got some really interesting information from Lady Caltaine. Celaena goes down and visits her in the prison cells, mostly because she wants to inquire about Roland. She's hoping she can get some insight or some answers about why he's here, what's he like. But while she's down there, she notes how cold and cruel the conditions are for Caltaine, despite her being a lady of the court. So, because Lady Caltaine is not some criminal just out on the streets that has
Right.
committed a crime against the crown. She was literally there courting a lord. Or
Yeah.
no, what is Is Parrington a lord? I forget.
Duke Parrington.
Duke, that's right. Duh. Okay. She's there to court Duke Parrington, and she's very much involved with everything. And so it seems really harsh to then turn around and put her in these cells.
Yeah. Like,
Granted, of course, they're trying to make it seem like she committed an assassination attempt.
yeah. Put her in prison, sure, but maybe slightly more humane conditions.
Especially after, oh, there was one quote that Celaena had. But before we get there, first, Lady Caltaine confirms Celaena's suspicious about Roland being a grimy piece of shit. My words, not hers. She doesn't like Roland. And she actually specifically says none of us can be trusted, especially not Roland. The things I've heard about him are enough to turn even your stomach, I bet. Very ominous, very suspicious. So when I first read that, I thought Caltaine was referring to the fact that he is a member of the court like her, which is true and probably accurate. Don't trust the council members because they're in direct
Mhm.
association with the king. We don't know what the king's doing. He might be influencing them. But when I reread it, I actually believe she might be referring to this mini army of influenced people or maybe even evil spirits because we see that Celaena believes Caltaine has gone mad
Okay.
because of these crows and flapping wings she
Right.
mentions. But I really feel like Caltaine is seeing and hearing the things that are in the in between world that we learned about at
Yes.
the end of Throne of Glass. So she's been having this access to the dark magic and Parrington uses, but
Mhm.
remember, like Cain got overtaken by this evil. Like the evil was
Mhm.
stronger. He got to a point where he wasn't really in control of it. So I feel like that's also what's happening to Caltaine. And so the king and Parrington are experimenting on her, but it's deeper than that, which we keep being like the king is small potatoes. Obviously, now in the plot, too, it's
Yeah.
getting to a bigger spotlight on the fact that there is something bigger than the king going on. And so I do
Mhm.
feel like Caltaine is not just talking about people, she is talking also about evil spirits and darker, more nefarious things.
I think there's evidence to support that even from Throne of Glass, because if you recall, there's a scene where she's walking down the hallway to go to
Mm-hmm.
dinner at Duke Parrington's table, and she sees a figure down the hall. She doesn't know who it is immediately, but she sees shadowy outlines, silhouettes of flapping
Yes.
wings. Then
Yeah.
as the figure approaches, it ends up being Kane, and he just says,
Mm-hmm.
"Good night, my lady," or whatever he says.
Right.
And then she forgets about it. And so I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's been breadcrumbs of that line of thought, even in Throne of Glass, that the
Mm-hmm.
closer proximity she has to Parrington and the King and the length of time of that proximity exacerbates her condition. I do think you're right that she's probably at a point almost of no return because she even says, I believe it's on page 71, and my headaches are worse every day, worse and worse, and full of all those flapping wings. We know that the
Mm-hmm.
headaches, confirmed by Parrington in a conversation to the king, have a direct correlation to the amount of magic being used and
Yes.
influenced in her. So that to me says that they're still doing that. And remember, in that final conversation with Parrington and the king, I believe the king says, we have more plans for her. Like, we're not done with her yet. And as we progress, she even says, sometimes I think they brought me here not to marry Parrington, but for another purpose. They want to use me. And so even
Mm-hmm.
Calpain is able to sense this underlying purpose that the king and Parrington had for her, that she has become a pawn in their game.
Right. Well, I keep thinking about that word they again, right? They want to use me. They brought me here, not to
Hmm.
marry Perry. I feel like that's pretty non-specific. And I think as the reader, you're supposed to believe that it's just about Parrington and the king.
Hmm.
But I do strongly feel like it is in more
A
nefarious evil,
larger
like
they,
the
an
Dark
all
Lord of
encompass,
Erewhon
yeah,
or
like an all
something.
encompassing they. Yeah, the they. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's
Yeah.
true. I do wonder though, as I read that last quote, I kept thinking, but what are they using her for? Because then she also goes on to say at the end of their interaction, something is
Hmm.
coming and I am
Yeah.
to greet it.
Is he like sacrificial then? Like what?
That's what I wrote. Okay, so I was gonna say, I wrote maybe they're gonna use her body as a vessel or some part of a ritual to summon or access dark magic. I don't know, but there's definitely something to that. Then
Mm-hmm.
also Celaena is asking her, use you for what? And she says, they never say. When they come down here, they never tell me what they want. I don't even remember. It's all just fragments, shards of a
Yeah.
broken mirror, each gleaming with its own individual image. And I feel like that
Hmm.
language is so descriptive and so specific, right? I wish I had a little bit more analysis and context to provide for it. I'm not taking it necessarily at face value, but I need more interaction with Celaena to process what she's saying in a broader context. But I don't know. I found this whole chapter absolutely riveting. I am just on pins and needles, desperate for a scene from the King or Parrington's perspective where they go down to visit Celaena and we see what's going on with her. I want to know.
Gosh, I feel exactly the same way. And I can't piece it together right now, but you know that it's
Mhm.
important, right? You
Yes.
know, I need to remember this because it's going to mean
Yes.
something, but I have no
Yes.
idea what it means. I have my one or two puzzle pieces in a 1,000 piece
Yes.
puzzle, and I'm just sitting here like,
I
is it in the corner?
will.
Is it in the middle? Where does this piece go? I don't know.
I will be coming back to this chapter. Okay, I do have two questions for you. The first is when Celaena initially goes down to the dungeon, she describes it as absolutely freezing. The metal was bitingly cold. So, on the one hand, obviously it's a dungeon, not great conditions. That tracks for a description of a dungeon. But we have also had many conversations on this podcast about it being icy and cold and dark magic
Yeah.
taking the warmth out of a space. Do you feel that the dungeon is dark and dank because it's a dungeon or because of the remnants of the evil magic that is practiced there?
I get the inkling that I'm sure there has to be a connection to
Has to be.
something magic that's going on in
Yes.
there. Even Kane was summoning his stuff in these tunnels. I guess that's not necessarily the dungeon, that's a separate area, but it's all underground somewhere. And I feel like there's a bunch of shady stuff going on. We have that secret library that's buried somewhere way down in there that
Mhm.
nobody has ventured into, but I'm very suspicious about that place too. So I feel very
There
certain
should
that.
be.
Oh, do we learn more in the next chapter?
Yeah. In the next
Oh,
set,
I knew
yeah.
they were gonna with more creepy hooded midnight figures.
Unclear. Unclear.
Ah, okay.
I know. My second question for you. This is an observation that Celaena makes about the state of Celaena's existence. And she says
Mm.
she had bruises on her wrists that looked eerily like handprints.
Uh,
And then Celaena responds with the guards look the other way when Parrington comes to visit.
yeah.
My immediate gut reaction is that Parrington is sexually assaulting her and that the guards are letting it happen. Is that the impression you got as well?
I didn't know if it was necessarily sexually assaulting in that manner, but it is something. He is doing something to her. Why else would you have
Uh,
handprint bruises on your wrists unless you were
yes.
being grabbed really intensely or something? I don't know. But
That
it
really
was
bothers
really,
me.
it
Like,
really, yes, it really did.
really, really bothered me. Even more than just, I would say I'm not happy that she's being treated so horribly, but I did not like that. I am happy that Celaena is outraged and tries to intervene with Kaol and that Kaol intervened on
Yeah.
her behalf because she's still a human being.
That's what I'm saying. And again, she didn't actually do these things. She was under the influence of something that made
Yes.
her do them. She was not herself when she did any of these things. So,
That
and she's still not herself.
Yes, that's the worst part, right? Because the king and parenting are the ones punishing Celaena and keeping her in these horrid conditions, and they're the ones who basically made her do these things. The hypocrisy
Mhm.
of it is just outrageous. Absolutely
Oh, yeah.
outrageous.
I can't wait until the king gets like pummeled, till Celaena just gets up in there and maybe she'll behead him. I don't know. But
I'm getting angry right now just thinking about it, actually.
me
Damn it. Now
too.
I'm gonna go to bed bad. Damn it.
You're gonna have heroic dreams of Celaena beheading
Oh my gosh. Okay.
the
Okay.
king tonight.
Totally off topic. But last night I was doing the read ahead for the next set of chapters and it was so late and I was so tired, but I couldn't put it down. And then literally all night I had dreams about Crown of Midnight. I text Lorraine and I was like, I am angry because I did not sleep well. I woke up stressed because I'm stressed about Celaena's problems. In my
Yes.
dream, I was inside her mind trying to help her work through everything that was going on. I was stressed. Celaena was stressed. Nobody felt good. And I woke up and guess what? I'm fucking stressed now too.
Yeah. How
I
to
don't
solve this?
know.
I haven't had any weird dreams or anything, but a lot of my free thinking space is preoccupied with thoughts in
Yeah.
this book. So,
Yeah. It's taking up a lot of my mental real estate very quickly.
well, it got really exciting all of a sudden in this book. Not to say the
So
other one wasn't
fast.
exciting, but I feel like this one has gripped me much quicker than Throne of Glass did.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, moving on. Celaena leaves the dungeons. She leaves Caltaine with a cloak, which I thought was very nice of her to do because she saw that
Agreed.
Caltaine was freezing. Then we get to the next morning. Celaena has invited Nehemia to her room for a breakfast chat because the weather was too bad for her to go spy on Archer. So, first and foremost, I love Fleetfoot. The descriptions of her are just so cute. And
Yes.
I say this because I have dogs. So I can totally just picture them sitting there
Staring.
locked in on the bacon, just waiting patiently for somebody to drop something so that they can come and snatch it up. The way that they stare at you and they want something, it's so funny.
Yes. For those of you listening, not watching, Lorraine is making the cutest puppy dog eyes.
I'm thinking of my dog Ernie, and he literally looks like a seal to me sometimes. He just has these really big eyes, and his ears are like flat against his head, and he's just staring. And I'm like, don't look at me like that. Next, Celaena informs Nehemia about the conditions of Caltaine's situation and what she learned from her. And Nehemia is very outraged by the way Caltaine has been treated in the prison because she can only imagine how much worse criminals from other classes must be treated if Caltaine, as a lady of the court, has been subjected to these awful conditions. Celaena informs her that she had Kael handle the guards and Lady Keltaine's treatment, which I thought was also really nice. And again, I'm really happy that Kael did something about that too,
Mhm.
because it shows his character. More importantly, Nehemia goes on to muse about how the courts have changed over time and that people used to have honor and loyalty within them. She says, I think such honor faded from Otterlin generations ago, but before Terrasen fell, its royal court was one that set the example. My father used to tell me stories of Terrasen's court, of the warriors and lords who served King Orlin in his inner circle, of the unrivaled power and bravery and loyalty of his court. That was why the king of Otterland targeted Terrasen first, because it was the strongest. And because if Terrasen had been given the chance to raise an army against him, Otterland would have been annihilated. My father still says that if Terrasen were to rise again, it might stand a chance. It would be a genuine threat to Otterland.
You know who's from Terrasen?
Celaena,
Elena.
aka somebody else, I think.
Well, we know she's somebody else. We beat that to death on the podcast.
I know, but I think we
Oh, you know who
learned
she
who she might
is?
be.
You
Yes,
think so?
I think so. Yes, absolutely.
Wait, huh?
That's the biggest of okay, we'll get there when we get there. So I had a couple questions. Obviously, I want to know what made Terrasen so strong. Were there Fae there? Is Celena's family related to this event when she was 8 years old? Was Terrasen's fall in alignment with when Celaena was young? I have timeline questions. I want to know if it was around the same time or if this is like
Yeah, almost
it is
positive
around
because
it is.
yeah, because I think in Throne of Glass, when we have a little flashback to the memory, she says something like that fateful night when Otterlin invaded. I'm
Oh, okay.
99.9% sure the day Otterlin invaded Terrasen corresponds with her parents' death and her ending up on the banks of the frozen river being
Okay,
found
yes.
by Arab and Hamill. I don't know why
She's
we
always
have
on that
keyed in
river.
on that phrase. Like we always like repeat on the banks of the frozen
The
river.
frozen river. I know. Literally. Okay, yeah. I had a suspicion, but she hasn't like officially confirmed that yet. But yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like you pretty sure that that is the same night. But I want to know what's up with Terrasen. Why were they so strong? And obviously, there's a lot of sprinkling of breadcrumbs that indicate Terrasen will rise again.
Yes, and not even necessarily Terrason. I actually had a quote and a question here. So then after that big kind of block of text we get from Nehemia, she then goes on to say, do you think another court like that could ever rise again? Not just in
Mm-hmm.
Terrason, but anywhere. I've heard the court in Wendelin still follows the old ways, but they're across the ocean and do us no good. They looked in the other direction while the king enslaved our lands and still refuse all calls for aid. And so
Mm-hmm.
two things. First of all, I do think this quote is representative of a larger foreshadowing that a true, good, loyal court will rise again to rule Otterland. That also
Mm-hmm.
seems to align with the general trajectory of the series. The King of Otterland is bad. There's great evil. We need to get rid of him, overthrow, and rebuild Aurelia to be a peaceful, loving place, blah, blah, blah. Okay? But this is now the fifth or sixth time that Wendland has come up. It's mentioned passingly a couple times at Throne of Glass. And I do wonder at some point if we're going to go there, they're going to become relevant in some way. Perhaps they're finally going to get involved in the conflict in Aurelia. Initially, I thought, oh, it's just mentioned because it's a place that exists and the king is thinking about conquesting them. It's just to drive the background plot a little bit. But now it's been talked about enough times that it makes me
Mm-hmm.
feel like perhaps Gwendolyn is going to become more important. What did you think about that?
Oh, I had the same feeling.
Okay.
Anytime there's more than two mentions of something, I'm like, gotta remember that.
Yes, yes. I think it's like three. One's is an introduction, two is a coincidence, three
Three is you better
purposeful.
bookmark that and
Yes,
pay
yes.
attention. So yeah, I don't know what capacity. Maybe Wendelin comes in and they aid in some way. They don't become the ruling court or anything like that necessarily,
Hmm.
but they come in and help when it really matters.
Hmm.
Because it sounds like they've kept out of things for the most part, but because they are across the ocean, that's how they've been able to stay unconquered, I guess,
Hmm.
and the fact that they're also strong, but also they have the distance to their advantage as well. Last, we learned that Roland has been assigned to watch over Nehemia, which is
Hmm.
super sus, and I get a very bad feeling about that.
I feel if our assumption that Roland is becoming a puppet for the king, having him close to Nehemia is not good. It's not good for Nehemia. It's not good for the home team. It ain't good.
Mm-mm. And yeah, that's all we have for that chapter, or that's all I have. Did you have anything else?
Just that Fleetfoot steals the bacon and stares Celaena down. I love that.
That's one of my favorite quotes.
Me too. That's one of my favorite moments, and I'm going to say it here and I'm going to repeat it later because I love it.
It's so cute. She provides comedic relief.
She does.
All right. Chapter 10. We start this chapter off with Dorian and Kaol in the kennels. They have gone there because they are trying to avoid Dorian's horrific little brother, Holland, who has returned back to the castle from school. It turns out that Holland was pulled from school due to the king's concern over the growing rebel movement. So, A, Holland sounds like a total brat. Enough said.
Mm-hmm.
Think that's more than obvious. But it is interesting that the king is concerned enough to bring him back to the castle.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, now I'm also wondering, is Holland going to become a problem later on in a bigger manner?
Yeah, I did wonder that too. But if I recall correctly, in Throne of Glass, it stated that he's only, I think, about 10 years
Hmm.
old. And so he's pretty young to really be involved in kind of anything that's going on other than just being an obnoxious, spoiled brat. So
Hmm.
I don't know the timeline necessarily of this book and or the series. This book feels pretty quick paced to me. I feel like it takes place maybe over the course of 2 or 3 months. So obviously Holland would not be aging that much in that time frame. So I don't necessarily
Yeah.
think he's going to become an issue. Actually, this is so funny you said that. I did have this one thought that maybe something goes down with Dorian, Celaena, Kaol, something happens and Holland happens to witness it. Like they're using
Oh.
magic or he sees Nehemia using a word mark. He witnesses something important and then Holland becomes an issue because obviously they can't kill him, but they can't trust him to keep his fat, spoiled mouth shut either. So that was the only way I could see Holland getting more involved in the plot. But I don't know. I really don't think we're going to see much of Holland. I think he's just going to be a background character and we're going to just laugh at him. I did, however, think it was absolutely hilarious when Kale and Dorian were talking about how Queen Georgina always gets some ridiculous gifts. And the last gift she got him was a mini carriage with horses that he could drive around. And I just pictured like a 10-year-old in a tiny, like round carriage with ponies just going ham in the garden. I don't know why, but I just thought that was a really funny visual.
Well, he's like tearing it up too. He ruins her favorite gardens.
Yes.
All
If I
right.
was a queen, I'd be so fucking mad. But I don't know. I
Holland
just thought
on
that
his
was a
carriage.
funny.
Vroom vroom,
Yes.
bitch. Just drive.
The longer I thought about it, the funnier it became to me.
Well, I'm imagining him with those small midget horses too, like small ponies, I guess. Like,
You can't say midget horses. That is not PC, right? You can't say midget horses. You need to rephrase that.
what do
Okay.
I wait, what do you
Miniature,
what do,
miniature
min-
horses, ponies. You call them midgets. What's wrong with you? Oh my God.
sorry. I didn't mean to be offensive. I just oh okay, yeah, miniature was the right word. Sorry. Miniature horses. That was the right word.
Lorraine has learned her lesson, and I will continue to be vigilant and scold her when she makes poor word choices.
Today's one of those days where I was feeling spicy, so it's the spicy half of my personality. It's just funnier to say though. You have to admit it. It's funnier to say. Okay. I'm done laughing. All right. So, on a more serious note, we learn some information about Kale's background. Dorian makes a comment about how Holland's really annoying, and last time he saw him, he wanted to punch his teeth out or something of that nature. And Kale said, think the word my brother was always too afraid of me to talk back. And we have some thoughts from Dorian. Dorian tried not to look surprised. Since Kale had abdicated his title as heir of Aniel, he hadn't seen his family in 10 years and rarely spoke to them. In the next paragraph, Dorian could have gleefully killed Kale's father for disowning him, refusing even to see Kale when he brought his family to Rifthold for an important meeting with the king. Even though Kale had never said it, Dorian knew the scars went deep, which I didn't realize Kale's dad has disowned him at this point.
Yeah. I think it's implied in subtext in the first book in his brief conversations about his history with Celaena. I
Yeah.
remember specifically there was a thought that Celaena had where she uses context clues to determine that his relationship with his father isn't very good. But then she said
Mm-hmm.
something to the effect of, what if his mother, and what is his relationship with his mother?
Mm,
So I think it's pretty heavily implied that his relationship with his family is not good, and then confirmed in this conversation with Dorian.
right. I think you do see that he mourns that because
Oh,
in
yeah.
another chapter, Celaena walks in, he still has a tapestry of some sort that has
Mm-hmm. Of Silver
uh
Lake, his
yeah,
hometown. Mm-hmm.
yes. And so I
Yeah.
think he does miss that, but he didn't want the title, and what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Now, also on a serious note, we do get Celaena brought up in the conversation. We just get more evidence of the fact that Dorian is definitely very jealous, and that Kale also denies any feelings that he has. So Kale brings up his concern about Celaena in relation to Archer. He doesn't like Archer and he worries for Celaena's safety when she interacts with him. Dorian says, I don't think you need to worry about Archer stealing her away. And then Kale says, you think that's what I'm worried about? Then Dorian has a thought where he says, yes. And it's obvious to everyone except the two of you.
On the one hand, I do feel Dorian is correct. It is
Mm-hmm.
because he has a romantic interest in Celaena. But I also feel that Kale just cares about her as a friend. You also have to remember he is the captain of the guard. It's unclear whether he actually outranks Celaena. Regardless, she falls under his purview of command, right? He's
That's
in
true.
charge of all of the king's defenses, and that would probably include Celaena. So I think he does actually care from a asset perspective. Of course, I do think it's mostly the romance, but I don't think Kale only cares just because he's secretly in love with Celaena. There's other things at play there. I feel strongly about that.
Yeah, this is true, but we also see the shift in his reasoning for why he cares about Selena. At first, it was heavily more towards duty, but
Right,
I
right.
think we're starting to see the shift where now we're like, oh, okay, you protect her because you also do have
Love
strong
her.
feelings for her.
You love
Yes.
her. Yes. Fair enough.
Mostly, I just hope that their little love triangle doesn't interfere with their friendship too much. Because I would
Too
hate for
late for
Dorian and
that.
I, I just don't want it to get really messed up with all of them. Because Kale and Dorian were friends.
For a really long
So,
time.
yeah, ever since they were kids. And so it'd be really sad for love triangle situation to interfere with their friendship.
I think it'll be okay. It's going to be a little awkward to navigate. I think Dorian will eventually get over it. Dorian will find a new love interest. Loki, okay, Loki, totally off topic here. I kind of want Dorian and Nahimi to end up together. I don't know why, but I could kind of see it.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
if Dorian's storyline continues as I think it will, and that he shows a lot of personal growth and develops more resolve, I could see him and Nehemia having this weirdly magnetic chemistry.
Yeah, that's true. It could probably be
Yeah.
very compatible
Yeah.
just in
And
their
they both,
visions for how they
yes,
want to rule too.
they would be a formidable couple as a ruling family. And they both love dogs, like a
That's
lot.
true.
So that's a big thing to have in common. And they're both handsome. So they would make beautiful babies. They're both handsome. They're both beautiful and handsome, whatever. You know what I mean? They would make gorgeous children. And I don't know. I'm just want everybody to be happy.
That's true. Yeah. I don't like all this fighting. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, sad. Anyways, moving on in this chapter. Next, we have Selena's sexy dinner. So she gets dressed for her dinner with Archer, and she's wearing this red, scandalous sounding dress, which I like it. I like the vibe.
Yeah.
She's walking out. Kale sees her and definitely likes what he sees. I'm
Oh,
sure of
yes, he
that.
does. And he would also like if nobody else ever saw it except for him.
I know. That was my quote. I was like, but of course, Kale being Kale, all he says is, you're not wearing that. Do you
I
have any weapons
know.
on you?
I also liked whenever Celaena is thinking about what she's wearing and describing it after Kale asks if she has any weapons. It's Celena's thought, but she's thinking about what Philippa said. And she says, to her delight by Philippa, so she didn't need to go traipsing around with cold metal jammed between your breasts. Because
Yes.
remember, that's where she would put her weird makeshift hairpin weapon, and
Yes.
she would
Yeah.
just shove it right down
Yeah.
on in there. And I just thought that was so funny that Philippa was like, "Girl, don't put that between your breasts, okay? Get a sheath, do something better, more creative."
That's true. Philippa's coming in like clutch, though. She made her
Mhm.
specific weapon hairpins, and I'm like, nice. That's
That's
cool.
my
I like
girl.
that. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oops.
Philip always knows what to do. Anyways, I thought this was very cute. Selena, of course, takes offense to this, though, because she takes offense about everybody worrying about her, which I'm like, why? But her thought was she never should have told him about her capture, never should have let him see her as vulnerable because now he'd just worry about her and doubt her and irritate her to no end. The idea of him thinking that she was weak, that she needed to be protected, made her want to shatter someone's bones.
Coming in a little hot there.
Yeah. Why so aggressive?
Yes, there's a lot of aggressive, violent language. Like Dorian wanted
Yeah.
to splatter someone against the wall. Gale wanted to
They're all
smash his
so
face. And
angry. Yeah.
I'm like, y'all need to go to yoga or do some self-care, take a bubble bath because you need to take it down a few notches. Okay. It's not that
Maybe have some
serious.
opium.
Wine, some wine. Okay, opium. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Is that what you do to de-stress, Lorraine? You just have some opium.
No, but that's what Lady Caltaine does.
That's
Works
true.
for
And
her.
that did not work out well for her. No, it
Oh.
didn't work for her.
Anyways, I did note this as a character insight, though, because I was under the impression that she did enjoy having somebody who cared about her. In the first book, she really wanted to have friendships and
Mhm.
companionship, and she was really lonely. But this quote kind of seems to indicate she doesn't want anybody to worry about her. More specifically, she doesn't want anyone believing she is incapable of taking care of herself. It seems more deep-seated to me,
Mhm.
maybe from the fact that she grew up pretty alone and had to take care of herself
Yeah.
in many ways and grow up very quickly. So it feels threatening to have somebody care about her safety because the
Yeah.
implication is that that person is too close to her and therefore could
Mhm.
hurt her or get hurt.
Yeah. I'm gonna go a little deep here. So my husband told me this a really long time ago when we first started dating, and it foundationally changed the way I think about people and love and relationships specifically. And he said, "We accept the love we think we deserve."
Mm,
And I have sat with that for a long, long time. I think ultimately that is very reflective of Celaena's mental state here. Celaena experienced great trauma. I think that her childhood and upbringing was rough, to say the least. And I think Celaena for sure struggles with her identity. And that has a lot of psychological implications about how she fits into the world and what is her purpose. But ultimately, at her core, the only person she ever let get close to her and really love her was Sam. And we
mhm.
know that he was violently ripped away from her. And so I think it's really, really hard for Celaena to be vulnerable and open up and let herself be loved and accept the love that Kale, or even friendship love that Kale or Dorian has to offer, because I don't think she thinks that she's worthy of it. It's hard to watch sometimes Kale and Dorian and Celena's interactions because they all just want to love each other and take care of each other, but they all keep getting in their own way.
Yeah.
It's very complicated. I didn't mean to get that deep. I took it a little too far. My bad. My bad. Reel it back.
No,
Reel it
no, I
back.
think that's nice. I'm
Bring
just gonna
Fleetfoot
say,
back.
oh yeah, let's pet the puppy while we talk about this because that's comforting. It's soothing.
Fleetfoot is my therapy dog.
Yes, she is really. But I agree with everything that you just said. I had more of the interpretation though that perhaps it's not that she didn't want to be loved, but she was afraid of how painful it is when people
Hmm.
that she loves are taken away. And I think that's been a recurring thing for her. Sam
Yeah.
died, her parents died. She's worried about what could happen to Nehemia, Kale, and
Hmm.
Dorian if the king finds out about that they're friends. Or if the king knows what she's really doing, then their lives are at risk, right? So she
Hmm.
provides that distance in order to keep them safe because she could not handle if they died because of her.
Yes. I think it's just fear of loss, fear
Mhm.
of having to feel that loss. And ultimately, she just doesn't know how to let someone love her. She just can't get out of her own
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Next, we move on to Celena's dinner with Archer and Maya.
Ooh.
Oh man. If they actually had done something, I'm sure it would have made a very spicy scene. But aside from that, we also get some really notable information about Archer.
Wait, pause. I bet you $15 that someone wrote a fan fiction about Celaena and Archer. I guarantee it. I bet they did. If
I would
anybody
be
knows
for
about
that.
that, send it to us.
Oh yeah,
Send it
send
to
us
us
an
in an
email.
email.
Yeah,
Even
for
if it's
sure.
spicy, that's okay.
Even if, make sure it's spicy if you're gonna send it.
Okay, yes, what Lorraine sent me. Make sure it's spicy if you send it to us. I know I'm
If it's
struggling
not
because
spicy, I don't want it. Just kidding.
there's no spice in these books. And tangent, I'm halfway through the second book of Crescent City, and there's just no spice. There's not enough.
Nothing. And
I'm
it's dry.
desperate.
It's
It's
a
dry.
desert. It's a, it's a desert in these books. We need
Did
some
you
water.
did you mean for it to come out the way that it just did?
Yeah, it did. That was intentional. 100%. I told you I'm like in a spicy mood.
Did you have a glass of wine before we started recording?
No, I just had coffee. I had coffee at like 7 p.m. 'cause I'm tired.
This is fun. I like this. I think you should drink coffee before every recording.
It gets me alert. My mind is racing.
Oh, I bet it is. Okay, keep
We're
going.
gonna get back on track here. So, Addison, you mentioned this already, and I think we discussed it earlier. Archer works on behalf of a very influential Do you say madam or madame?
Madame. I
Madame.
say madam. I think the French pronunciation would be madame, but we'll
Madame.
call her Madame
Madam.
Clarice. Madam.
Madam Clarice. Anytime the name Clarice comes up, it just makes me think of Silence of the Lambs, which is a very different vibe from any of this.
Wow. That's so funny because when you say Clarice, it makes me think of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Oh.
Also very different vibes. So you can tell what kind of movies I watch. Elf, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Do not.
Lorraine watches
I'm watching
Silence of the Lambs.
I'm watching psychological thrillers. I love a good murder mystery. But anyways, Clarice, we learned that she trained him and he is currently indebted to her still, which basically makes her his pimp, but the female version of that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't know what you call a lady version of a pimp, but she is a lady pimp.
Do you want me to Google that?
Yeah.
Fun. Okay. Oh, okay. A procurer, colloquially called a pimp if male or a madam if female.
Oh, so madam was the right term. Madam sounds so much nicer than pimp.
I know. Pimp sounds really harsh, and madam sounds
proper and nice.
It does.
Pimp sounds criminal.
It does.
They're both criminal.
Okay.
I'm laughing too much to be serious about this next note, which is sad. But on a sad note, Archer was enlisted as a courtesan from the age of 12. And then we learned there was a bidding party for his virginity when he turned 17.
Yes. That was creepy.
What the heck?
There's something about that. We actually contemplated like him just being passed around to the highest bidder. That's really dehumanizing. I do feel for him because this is discussed in the book. There's a parallel between their situations, right? Celaena was trained with weapons. Archer was trained with sex. And they're basically both had the same job. We know that from the first book, Celaena owed Arabin for all of her training. It was 500,000 gold marks. And similar situation with Archer. He owes Madame Clarice X amount for all his training. So,
which I'm like, I don't even want to know what went into that training.
I kind of do.
He was a child, Addison.
Oh, okay. Well, now I feel uncomfy and yeah.
You should. Just kidding.
You're right. I forgot about that. My bad.
Okay. Anyways, Celaena does note that as well. Archer asks her how she ended up working for the king, and she tells him that she was recruited. They have a little bit of a bonding moment about the similarity of their positions, and she says, "Our professions have always been similar, yours and mine. I can't tell which is worse, training us for the bedroom or the battlefield." So, which are both equally horrible situations.
Yeah.
And they're both obviously enslaved in a way because they're indebted to these people for a crazy amount of money and everything, almost to the point where you're probably having to work almost your entire life, I'm sure, to get out of that situation. And so you're never free, right?
Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts about this conversation between Archer and Celaena. The first is more lighthearted, so I'll start with that. I gotta say, I loved the flirtatious tension between Celaena and Archer. Their banter is so witty and quick, and it's written really well. I can picture it. I can feel it. I don't know. I was into it. Again, as I said earlier, for a brief moment, I was like, ooh, Celaena and Archer. But then he opened his mouth some more, and I rapidly changed my opinion. So during this conversation, there are a couple of quotes that really made the spidey senses start tingling just a little bit. I think that we as the reader are supposed to think that Archer is just an old friend of Celaena. They have this bond of their experience. But I think that he is more than he seems on many
100%.
levels.
Yes, I agree.
Because then it occurred to me that I like him too much. It's too easy to like him. He's trying too hard. And so Celaena makes a couple observations about him that I think are important to note. The first is on page 81. In her observations, she says, the sound of his voice was enough to make her skin heat, but the look in his eyes as he said it, the curve of that divine mouth. He was a weapon too, a beautiful, deadly weapon. I feel that part of Celaena's character and her training is that she has to be extremely perceptive and observant. A lot of times, Celaena is really prone to making these observations about people almost subconsciously, not aware that she's actually picking up on something really important. Like, for example, that Archer is more than he seems. For her to call him out as a weapon implies to me that there's this undercurrent of danger to him that most people don't see because he's just dazzlingly handsome courtesan who's so charming. And in reality, it implies to me he can be much more calculating and deadly than what you're supposed to see. After they finish dinner, they end up in Archer's carriage together. As she's continuing to talk, she says, all comfortable, safe topics, though he kept looking at her like she was his prey and this was one long hunt. And something about that phrasing also put me on edge. Archer seems like the weaker of the two in this set of chapters, right? Celaena seems to have the upper hand. He's scared of her. He's begging for his life. But I'm actually not convinced that Archer is just some pretty boy courtesan who's like, oh, please don't kill me. And I don't trust him or his intentions.
I don't trust him either. Well, Celaena even says when she first sees him, she notes that he would have made a good assassin because he's
Yes.
so observant
Mhm.
of everything. And
Mhm.
then combined with these references to the way that he looks at her and these looks at her. And also, he was prepared when she reveals why she's there. He's very quick to jump back and pull out a knife
Oh,
and
yeah.
everything.
He's way too prepared for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, but I totally agree that something is really suspicious about him. But I think that is something separate from the side of him that we're exposed to in this chapter. I think those are
Mhm.
noted, and you're keeping that in the back of your mind
Mhm.
to prepare yourself for the next chapter. But
Yes.
currently, a lot of what I learned about him was very sad and
Yes.
depressing about his character. So
Okay.
to go into more detail, what we learn about Archer, Celaena recognizes the underlying unhappiness that Archer has from being a quote unquote prisoner.
Mhm.
And she asks him, do you hate your life? And then Archer says, someday I'll have enough money to pay off Clarice forever to really be free and live my own life. And Celaena was a thought where we learn she too was just about to be free when she was captured. That thought is she had a flicker of a memory from a time when, just for a moment, she'd been free, when the world had been wide open and she'd been about to enter it with Sam at her side. So obviously, this must have something to do with the night that she was betrayed. Maybe she was
Oh,
betrayed because
yes.
she was making a move to get out of
Mhm.
Arabin's clutches and her indebtment. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a word, but her indebtment to him.
Yes. I wondered because in Throne of Glass, there is a part of the story where she recalls how she finally paid off her debt to Arabin. It's 500,000 gold marks. And then she says it was all gone in like 3 hours. And remember, we had a
Mhm.
brief conversation. What the hell did he do with $500,000 in
Yes.
3 hours? And I do wonder if paying off her debt to Arabin coincides with her capture. So then it led me to the thought of what if
Oh.
part of why Arabin betrayed Celaena is because once she paid off her debt to him, she intended to no longer be an assassin, and Arabin didn't like that. Maybe Arabin was under the impression, you'll pay off your debt to me, but you'll still continue to work for me because this is what I bred
Mhm.
and raised you to do. But when she tells him, no, I want my freedom, I'm done, I've repaid my debt, he kind of goes nuts and is like, well, if I can't have you, nobody can, and then turns her over to the king. That's kind of a
Mm.
wild, kind of wild goose chase thought. But I do wonder if those events coincide with the capture of Sam.
They very well could.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of starting to feel like Arabin's reason for betraying her was much more nefarious than just she wanted to be free and he was mad about that.
You think so?
I just get a bad feeling about him I just feel like you wouldn't betray somebody just for
Mhm.
that, right? Maybe you would, but
True.
it seems a little too surface level for
Yeah.
Arabin. Because again,
You
we think that Arabin's very calculating. I mean, he appears to be
true.
very calculating. He's a free agent. He works for whoever gives him the most money, runs his own show.
Right. Mhm.
So it seems like the only way that she was really going to get out of his clutches is if
To
she
kill
killed
him.
Arabin
Yeah.
or like faked her own death, like she's been doing with these other
Oh,
people. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
If you want, I can Google it and find out for you.
No, we're not going to Google anything. No
Okay, I
spoilers.
won't. Fine. I just every time we talk about this, I want to sleep peacefully, and I feel like I will not rest until we're done with this series.
Until we figure out what the hell Arabin's been up to.
Plot twist, it's never revealed in the entire series.
That would be tragic, and I would riot. Anyways, at the end of this chapter, Celaena reveals to Archer, "The king sent me to kill you." And then chapter ends. That's quite the cliffhanger. If we had stopped there,
Damn.
that would
That would have been
I would have
dope.
been
I should have
yeah.
done that.
No, that would have
Damn.
been
Next time.
horrible. All right. Chapter 11. So, understandably, Archer freaks out and begs Selena not to kill him. In his panic, though, Archer gives her a bunch of information. So, pretty much my bullet point note for this was the entirety of page 85. That's what I
That was
wrote.
pretty much exactly mine too. I started typing the quotes and then I was like, never mind.
So, one of the first things Archer starts saying is that if you spare me, I can feed you information about a group that I know is starting to gather power in Rifthold. So, when I heard that, it seems to imply that I think we speculated about this. There's potentially two different rebel movements going on, right? The one that
Yeah.
is related to Nehemia, and then
Hmm.
this one is separate. And it's confirmed to us that this is an entirely different kind of movement that's happening, right?
Well, so you're correct. However, I do think there's a shift in this chapter. So to break down our vision of how things are going in Aurelia, you have Nehemia, who's from Eelway, who is in the castle, and she's working mostly on behalf of her people because the majority of the people in the work camps in Indovir and Calcutta are Eelway rebels. That seems to be the strongest hold for rebels. Naomi's goal is ultimately to protect her people and try to minimize the impact of the work camps on them, like try to make the conditions better and to advocate for them. Of course, I think it's fair to assume that her secondary goal would absolutely be to get the king overthrown, but I think she realizes that's not realistic. The circumstances are not right for that, right? Then you have
Hmm.
Archer, who's informing us about a separate movement within Rifthold itself to overthrow the king and put Aelin Galathinius, who is the
Hmm.
lost heir of Terrasen, back on the throne. Our assumption is that Nehemia is not related to this movement in Rifthold. At least it was in the beginning of the chapters.
Hmm.
But as we progress, Celaena also confirms this in her thoughts. She wonders if there is a correlation between Nehemia and this movement because of the conversation they had the prior day, where Nehemia
Right.
is talking about, oh, the old days, Terrasen was the place to be. And I will say it does seem a little sus to me. We'll talk about that more as we progress into this chapter, but that's sort of to lay the foundation of the scene of what's happening in Aurelia at this time.
That makes sense. And I did have a little bit of suspicion too after Selena has that thought about Nehemia,
Oh, yeah.
because just the word marks and other stuff going on, I'm like,
There's a lot of
yeah, it seems.
connections that seem there's too many to just be a coincidence. One other thing I was thinking about the whole is Nehemia related to this current plot to put Aelin back on the throne is Celaena's thought is, was it mere coincidence that Nehemia had mentioned Terrasen's court that morning, that Terrasen was one force capable of standing against the king, if it could get to its feet again, with or without the true heir? But Nehemia had sworn to never lie to her. If she'd known anything, she would have said it. On the one hand, Celaena is correct. Nehemia did promise not to lie. But I went
Mm.
back and reread that conversation, and no lies are told. Nehemia does not make any claims about being involved with any kind of plot or
Hmm.
encouraging any kind of revitalization of Terrasen. She simply states that she wishes for a time when the courts were honorable, and she asks Celaena if it's possible that could happen again. So Celaena's justification doesn't align with reality because I think it is possible. And it just seems too coincidental that Nehemia mentions that. And then literally that night, Archer brings something else up. The thought, oh, okay, a thought just sparked. Okay, remember back at the last set of chapters of Throne of Glass when
Mhm.
Celaena and Nehemia are talking, and I told you that I thought Nehemia was lying to Celaena, that she did hear what Cain said, and she knows
Mhm.
it to be true. Because remember, Cain knew Celaena's true identity, and Celaena is very worried about this, and Nehemia's like, don't worry about it. People say crazy things when their souls are rotted by evil magic. And I said, Nehemia's absolutely lying. She knows what Cain heard, saw, etc., because she had access to the in-between.
Mhm.
What if Nehemia knows that Celaena is Aelin and that she is subconsciously working on Celaena to prepare her to overthrow the king and maybe take her rightful place back on the throne of Terrasen? I don't
Could
know.
be.
I don't know. Now the thoughts are
I could see
sparking.
it. I could definitely see that. The only explanation for why, for me, that might explain why Nehemia brings this up, but may not be involved with the movement is if she read some kind of ancient prophecy
Mhm.
in a book containing word marks in the ancient religion. Because she's been studying up on this stuff. She has a deep knowledge of these things. She can read any old books and stuff that she happens to get access to because she can read the language. Maybe she has read about it and is aware of some kind of prophecy stating that Aelin will
Yeah.
make it come back and restore Terrasen to its former greatness, et cetera, et cetera. But she does not know that there is another group who also has learned about this and is doing a separate thing. That's kind of the only explanation I can think of for how she wouldn't directly be involved with that movement, but is also still aware of it in some capacity.
Mhm.
Because obviously, we know there is a ton of information that has been lost, that people
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know about.
destroyed.
Exactly, because of what the king has done, and I'm sure there is just some kind of it wouldn't be a fantasy book without some kind of prophecy
Uh,
that dates back thousands of years or whatever it is, right? So, but
I
I totally
suppose.
agree that she's aware, but she's trying to pretend like she's is
Yeah,
not, you know,
absolutely.
for why, I don't know what's the point of lying to Slane about it. I'm not sure yet. Maybe it's not the
Mhm.
right time and she just needs to gather the forces before making a big move. I don't know. But I do get a sense that Nehemia is probably connected.
The bottom line is something is sus, something is
Yes.
going on, and we're gonna
Everything is
get to
sus.
the bottom of it one way or another.
Investigation Nation. So to continue on, Archer confirms that Aelin Galanthinius is the lost throne of Cherison, as Addison just stated, and that is what this group is focused on doing. And Celaena is very shocked by this. She says Aelin Galanthinius is dead. Then Arthur shook his head. They don't think so. They say she's alive and that she's raising an army against the king. She's looking to reestablish her court and find what's left of King Orland's inner circle. A couple of my questions were how far back in the timeline was King Orland? Is he what's assumed to be the person who was in power when Celaena was young before Terrasen fell?
Yes, my impression is that King Orlan was the current ruler of Terrasen when Adarlan
Okay.
invaded. I could be
Okay.
wrong because that's not explicitly stated in the book,
Right.
but the context of this chapter would seem to indicate because Archer says, find what's left of King Orlan's inner circle. The implication being that was the last inner circle of Terrasen. So they're looking for any remaining members who may have survived the invasion.
Okay. Yes. All right. That makes sense. This is where I had my big quote that really stuck out to me. Celaena has a thought where she says, if it were true, no, it wasn't true. If these people actually claimed to have met the heir to the throne, then she had to be an imposter.
And I would like to point out that the word had is italicized. And in general, in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, anytime words are italicized, it indicates two things: a heavy emphasis or it's an internal thought. Clearly, to me, is indicating a heavy emphasis within a thought. So
Mm-hmm.
I agree. That definitely made alarm bells go off in my head because it sort of confused me. I had to reread this a couple times because she seems so 100% convinced that Aelin is dead. She just outright declares it. She doesn't say she's presumed to be dead. She says she is dead and that can't be true. So that made me wonder is how could she possibly know that unless maybe she knew her or maybe this is the crazy thought. Like, what if she was hired by her to assassinate someone or she was hired to assassinate her? I don't know. There was something about that conversation and her response that was odd to me. It didn't sit with me well. It still doesn't sit with me even as I'm discussing it.
I guess I hadn't really thought about it that point. I had focused on the part where she said, then she had to be an imposter. And I'm like, as if she's implying that, well, my first note, I literally
Spit it out, Lorraine. What are you trying to say? Spit it out.
my first bullet point was, excuse me, but I am like 99.99% sure you are alien.
You think Celaena is Aelin?
What the heck else is she being faded for? Why is Elena coming up to her and being like, there's something greater and she's from Terrason? Why would she be like, she had to be an imposter referring to herself? An imposter for what? About what? What else would it be? I just feel like there's too many coincidences with Celaena's history and what little information we've learned about her. The fact that Elena, this god fey warrior, former queen, is coming to her in her visions. The way Elena talks about Celaena's role typically sounds prophetic, right? And in a
Mm-hmm.
similar manner, I almost wonder if maybe Aelin was a prophecy as well. So people weren't really
Mm-hmm.
sure if she was going to show up or not. But there was a prophecy that Aelin Galathynius, an heir to the throne, was going to rise up and bring Terrason back to power. But nobody had confirmation of that, right? But then we have the word mark books and these people, like, how else did people find out about this information if word marks coming from a book with ancient languages that are very, very old and supersede everything else? It all just sounds like a prophecy that was learned about because of this research. It's kind of like the Song of Ice and Fire in House of the Dragon, where there's only a few people that kind of know what's going on with it. It's just been getting passed down. We don't know when it's going to happen yet, but they
Right.
believe that it will, right? Maybe people are starting to be like, oh, now is the time. But people still don't actually know who Aelin is,
So
if that
my
makes sense.
only yes. So my immediate thought in response to that is that in general, prophecies exist over a much larger and broader span of time. You have to remember, it's only been 8 to 9 years since the King of Otterland invaded. So prophecy feels really heavy to me to place in this situation because a prophecy makes more sense where it's like someday someone will come and vanquish all the evil from the world, where it seems like the timeline of this evil is much smaller and more compact. I don't know. I'm confused with this conversation, and I honestly would have to read more. I need more evidence. I can't distinctly say where I land on that. I'm not going to dismiss it. I think it's definitely a possibility, but this is literally the first time we're hearing about any of this and hearing of who the hell Aelin Galathynius is. So I don't know.
But Aelin's related to Elena, obviously, because Elena's prior last name was Galanthinius, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
I thought it was Haviljard.
But she was Galanthinius before she was married to Gavin. And then her last name
Oh.
became Haviliard.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, that makes sense because King Brennan was the first king of Terrason. We know that Elena was his daughter. So Aelin would be a descendant of Brandon, Elena, etc. That makes sense.
Right. But
Oh, but Elena
given how
says
long
blood. She says they're blood relatives.
yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that is a little different now, now that I think about it.
Girl, I was sitting here being like, how do you not? How did you forget that? I was like, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy for having this
No,
thought right
no.
now.
Listen, it's not you, it's me, okay? My baby is sick and I'm tired and my brain's not working. Okay. Okay, I'm starting to put it together. I'm gonna say
It's just
maybe. A soft maybe.
it's just because then even with Davis, and we're gonna get to Davis when we get to Davis, but the fact that she finds this book that
Mhm.
it seems like he was trying to translate it, right? Because word marks, very few people know about them because they
Mhm.
predate current magic and they're very old.
True.
And so I feel a very strong sense that there is something. And this also connects to this idea that Celaena does not remember who she is. There's some kind of mental block of some sort.
No,
We
she
don't know
totally
why.
remembers who she is. I don't think she forgot who she was. She's just burying it deep.
Okay. I still feel like it hasn't reached her consciously. I don't know. Yeah, whatever it is. But pretty much the conclusion of this rambling is that I feel very strongly that Selena could very likely be Aelin. So
Okay, I'll entertain the possibility. I need to read a little further. I need to think about it a little bit more. Oh, great. Something else for me to think about tonight as I try to sleep. Thanks a lot, Lorraine.
exactly. Lots of stuff. There's just too much. Anyways, moving on. Selena ensures Archer that she is not going to kill him, but she gives him the same offer she's given all of her other targets and tells him he will need to fake his own death and that he can either do it now or she'll give him a month's time with the understanding that if he chooses to go with the month-long option, he will need to continue feeding her information about this rebel movement that she's trying to learn about.
Hmm.
Archer agrees and says, perhaps this is a blessing in disguise. I'll be free of Clarice and start my life anew elsewhere. And for his sake, I hope that works out for him. But Archer also informs her of a ball that is happening where potential members of this movement will be in attendance. So a spy quest is set. Hooray! After her conversation with Archer, Celaena does not spend the night with him, much to Kael's excitement because she goes and sees him. Well, he's
His
not
relief.
excited.
He's relieved.
Yeah, he's very relieved. She shows up at his room and she informs Kael about the potential rebel movement and the rumors about the lost heir, though she refrains from mentioning Aelin specifically, and that the movement is also working on uncovering the king's plan, which I guess she gave Kale a little bit of information, but not really a ton.
No, she's very selective about what she tells him.
So after this, then we have the resolution of a previous frustration between these two. They have a heart to heart argument, and Celaena says, I'm not some silly fool who can't protect herself or use her head. This is after Cal expresses that he was very worried about her, and she's like, why are you worried about me? Getting all angry at him. And Kale says, I know you can look after yourself, but I worry because I care. God's help me. I know I shouldn't, but I do. So I will always tell you to be careful because I will always care what happens.
I would like
That
to
was
point
just
out
so
the word
cute.
always is italicized for
I know.
emphasis. My note for that was quote on page 89, which is the one you just read, and I wrote, just kiss already.
I'm growing to like Kale. I never disliked him necessarily, but
Yeah,
I am
you're coming around.
am coming around to being like, okay, it'd be fine. But mostly he just wants to keep her safe because he
Yeah,
loves her, though he
he
won't
has
admit
to,
it.
right? He has to. He
Yeah,
just needs to admit it.
exactly. Moving on to chapter 12. So we have made it to the ball, ladies and gentlemen. Celaena arrives at the ball dressed as an elegant swan, and Archer is dressed as a wolf. We love a good
Mhm.
masquerade ball and costumes. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
But as they're walking in, Archer promises Celaena that Arabin is not in attendance, and neither is a lady named Lysandra, who is
Mhm.
a former courtesan who Celaena has a bad history with. I'm just going to note this here and then I'm going to circle back to it later. I know Archer knows about Arabin, But I find it a
Mhm.
little bit weird that he specifically points out that Arabin is not there.
Well, I thought he was doing that to reassure her.
Yes, that's what I thought at first. But combined with the other stuff later, I find it a little bit weird. Anyways, also, Lysandra, I don't know who she is or what this history was over, but she sounds scary. And immediately I am wondering, are we going to meet this woman later in the book? Are
Mhm.
they going to have another run in with each other?
I had some speculation on who she might be. So remember way back in Throne of Glass, there is a section of the book where Celaena is recalling her time in the Red Desert and her training. And then she also says something to the effect of she learned long ago not to befriend girls who would do
Mm,
anything to get what they wanted. And we had a brief discussion and some speculation about what that could possibly mean. And I wonder if Lysandra is the woman that she is referring to in that thought from Throne of Glass, because her line of work kind of opens her the door for her to be willing to do anything to get what she wants. And the book says she had a long, violent history. So it wasn't an isolated event, right? There were multiple
right.
things that transpired. So that was only the very briefest idea that I had. Obviously, I'm
Hmm.
just willing to
Yeah,
check some
yeah.
forcing them together. So maybe not, but that's what it sparked when I read that.
I could definitely see that. Next, we learn that Archer's client and host of the party is a man named Davis. Davis has been Archer's client for a few years and has been acting differently lately. Archer says that he's been acting much more paranoid, and he had actually overheard Davis and some friends discussing this plan with the rebels, Aelin, and the king and all them. And a specific quote was, I don't think they truly care about Aelin Galathinius. I think they just want to find a ruler who best serves their interests. If they aid her, give her badly needed supplies, then she'd owe them. They want a puppet queen, not a true ruler. Which to me, that doesn't line up with the nature of a movement like this. Like, why go through all the trouble of reestablishing a prophetic heir if you just want her to be a puppet?
Yes, I completely agree. It would seem odd to select someone to take over for the King of Adoulin that actually is of royal blood from a very prolific court that probably was very popular if you're just hoping to control them. Maybe the
And also would
idea.
be very formidable and powerful.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what are you gonna, you're not gonna control someone like that. What are you talking about?
yeah. Maybe the idea is twofold. One, she's a very young girl and they think they can just boss her around because she clearly would have been in hiding for a decade. And
Uh-huh.
two, maybe it's more the idea of, well, we helped you get back on the throne. You'll owe us a favor. And there's just this expectation that they'll get benefits from being part of that. But I agree. I did think it was a little bit odd. Doesn't seem like the best direction of the movement. And maybe it's possible that several members of the movement actually genuinely want Aelin as a ruler, whereas there's just a handful of baddies who really are in it for their own self-interest. So I don't know.
Like a sub faction of them are like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we'll support you, but really we have an alternative plan or something.
Yes.
It's a lot of potential groups and players that are
Hmm.
working in combination, but with potentially their own separate goals and interests.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm still very confused about how it all comes together.
Okay. So as you noted, Celaena comes as a swan and Archer comes as a wolf. And I just thought that was really heavy handed. I literally wrote, oh, come on, he's dressed as a wolf because we know the phrase, a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I wrote, a
Oh,
betrayer in
yeah.
courtesan clothing, because remember we discussed earlier that there's just something about Archer that just doesn't add up. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that's a very subtle nod to the idea that Archer seems like this pretty boy courtesan, but in reality, he's a wolf. He's a wolf assassin.
Mm.
I don't know. I
Ooh, I
just
like
thought that,
that. I really
yeah,
like.
we'll see. Maybe it's just pure coincidence, but If there's one thing I've learned, is almost nothing is coincidence. So we'll
Nothing is
see.
coincidence. Well, that definitely adds to my speculations that I have coming up. So
Yes.
excellent point. We continue on to learn that Davis and his crew had also saved an informant from being interrogated by the king. And Celaena, through this, kind of wonders if Kale had been a part of the interrogations for the king, though she's like, he hasn't done that before. It seems kind of weird, but just speculating about things. Obviously, she doesn't know what's going on. This is all very new to her. So she's trying to piece everything together. So Archer leads Celaena to this like side door thing and pretending like they're gonna go off and have a steamy little session to themselves. But they're sneaking upstairs and Archer leads her to Davis's, I think it's his like study room or something like that. But he happens to have a pick to pick the lock, which
Hmm.
like
How convenient.
how convenient. Archer picks the lock, and I don't remember exactly what he says, but something to the effect of be quick, just do
Yeah.
what you need to do and get out of there. So Celaena does just that. At first, she sees nothing notable, but then she sees, quote, a book with a single word mark written on the spine in blood red ink. Then, as she starts looking through that book, she notes that the book is full of word marks and with words she didn't recognize. Obviously, Celaena is very confused by this at first because she thought only Nehemia and her family knew how to use the word marks and their power. She was under the impression that most of these had been destroyed, except for The Walking Dead, which she had found conveniently by accident. She doesn't know how she found
Hmm.
that book either, but it appeared. And that's been the only other book that she's been able to find that had word marks and the ancient language and anything in it as well. So obviously, I'm thinking that the king knows that the rebels know about word marks, and
Oh,
that's why he's trying to take them out.
that's possible.
Because previously we were like, what else could be strong enough to overthrow the king given his power? The only reasonable counter that we are aware of is somebody else who knows how to use word marks, etc.
Hmm.
So, what other reason would the king have to take them out? That would be a pretty big reason. But then again, I'm led back to this idea of why Archer. So she
Yeah.
learns this stuff in Davis's office, and Celaena only learns about this in connection to Archer, but the king only
Hmm.
wants Archer. So then there has to be something about Archer, obviously, that
Oh, yeah.
is going on. So this is where I was like, this is all a front on Archer's part.
It
Like,
has to be.
yes.
Archer strikes me as someone who will do anything to save his own skin. He'll sacrifice anyone, anything. He doesn't have any real attachments. And
Mm-hmm.
I agree completely. I literally wrote, it's just all a little too convenient. He happens to know of this party, where the library is, that it's locked, that he has a lock picked. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, oh, be quick. And why would Davis go to his locked office during a party? You
Yes,
know what
that
I
was
mean? Like,
exactly my thought. I
for
was
what
like,
purpose?
I really got the sense that there was the setup, and I'll get to that. I have a couple
Yes.
other thoughts.
Yes.
So as Selena is looking through the book, there is a single sentence written on the inside. That quote is, "It is only with the eye that one can see rightly." And I
Ah,
was like, the eye of Elena.
yes.
Duh.
Duh. I know. Exactly. Like, if you didn't come to that conclusion, you need to read better. I'm sorry. Not all of the things in the books are obvious, but like, hello, hello. And we also have to remember, too, that not just the Eye of Elena, but also in Gavin's sword, and the pommel of the sword is an empty socket for an eye, basically, that's missing
Something,
the
yeah.
gem. So, eyes are important here, and not just like the eyes we see with, but the physical representation of the eye.
Yes. Okay. But also it says can see rightly. Remember when Elena's like, look to your right? And at the time, we
Oh,
were like, oh, poison test, look to your right. That's what she meant. But what if that was not actually what there's something deeper to this now?
oh. That's a good catch. Because see, we thought it was a poison test, remember? And then we were like,
Yes.
oh, it's the tunnel to the right. So you know where Damaris is. You can say the word around. But
Yes.
what if it's even bigger than that?
Wait, what does rightly mean? Because I feel like in this context, it's supposed to be something similar to truth seeking.
Okay, rightly can mean in accordance with right conduct, fairly, justly, in the right or proper manner, properly fitting, according to truth or fact, correctly or exactly. So
Mm,
that did make me wonder. It calls into question this idea of the Eye of Elena and its significance. Remember when we're first introduced to the amulet, it said that a spirit gave it to Elena and Gavin in their hour of need, and that it allowed them to see the Dark Lord Erewhon for who he truly was and speak his true name. This
yeah.
distracted him. They were able to slay him.
Hmm.
What if see rightly is a play on the idea that you can see things in their true form for who they truly are,
Hmm.
right? And so
Yes.
when I read that phrase, that is what came into mind, is that reference to the Eye of Elena, the Dark Lord Erewhon. And I'm just, woo, baby. I
But it
want to know
also,
more.
yes, I do too. It also makes sense in the context of the court situation too, right? Because there was that one part of the definition that was like seeing things in a just
Oh, a
way
fair and
or
just manner.
something. Yeah,
Hmm.
fair and just manner. And obviously that connects to the way that the king is ruling right now and how
Oh, yeah.
people don't like the way that he is conducting things. He's a tyrant and a conqueror. And
Hmm.
Terracin was noted for the way that they conducted court and was very
Yeah.
respectable in that manner. So,
There's a lot that you can pull out of that. It could
oh,
really go
yeah.
in a lot of different directions.
So Celaena is obviously confused by this. She doesn't know what it means, but she notes it and plans on trying to research it later. But before continuing on, she has a thought where she says, fortunes had been broken upon the loss of magic. People who had made their living for years by harnessing its power were suddenly left with nothing. It seemed natural for them to seek out another source of power, even though the king had outlawed it. But what? And then we get cut off. Obviously, I want to know what she was going to say, but I'm sure there are, like she said, tons of people who had magical abilities and who felt slighted and would love to get back at the king somehow. But this also seems to indicate that there was a specific source of power in existence previously where magic arose from. And Lena had told Celaena she needs to find the source of the king's evil.
Mm.
So are these separate sources? Are they different wells of magic or are they similar? I just have questions about what that means.
Yeah. The problem with me is every time any kind of conversation about magic comes up, it's so hard to speculate because we know so little about magic in this universe.
Right.
We barely have scratched the surface on word marks, and we really don't get any information about other kinds of magic and what it was used for, what kind of powers people had. Really, all we truly know is that magic was banned and disappeared like 10 years ago.
Right. That's true.
But they're all good
Hmm.
questions that we need answers to.
I would really like to know sometime
Me
soon.
too.
All right. This is where we get a very intense sequence of events. So she suddenly hears footsteps approaching and she's like, oh shit, what do I do? So she feigns a woman who is sad and crying because she was
Her betrothed left her.
her betrothed left her. Thank you. And Davis does not buy this. He says, no one has keys to this study, not even my housekeeper. What were you looking for? I'm just going to list out everything that happens and then I'm going to dive into what does
Okay,
all this mean. Okay.
take
So,
us through it.
so very quickly, Selena, just in the nick of time, realizes that Davis has a knife prepared and tries to attack her. She doesn't get stabbed entirely, but she does get cut. And she realizes that the blade she's been cut with had a paralyzing poison called Gloriella on it. This, she notes, is the same poison that was used on the night of her capture and the day Sam was killed. Selena also notes that she struggles with Davis. Someone must have trained him because in a too fast movement, he grabbed her wrists, twisting her to the ground.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm like, why was he getting trained? Who trained Davis, right? At the last part of the struggle, Celaena manages to find enough strength to get on top of him, and she ends up cutting him in the throat with his own poison dagger. And it goes bye bye,
Effective.
Davis. She then makes a grand escape and she's able to make it out of there. But to rehash all of this, again, we both find it way too coincidental that Davis, for one, uses Gloriella, which had been used against her before. And after he had nicked her and she started to get a little sluggish, he specifically says, "Don't you want to know what was on the blade?" As
Yes,
if
why does he
he,
tell her?
as
That was
it,
so
it seemed
dumb.
so, well, to me, that seems really intentional. Like he was trying to bait her.
Yeah,
Why would you say that unless you knew she had previously been poisoned in that manner before? Or,
that
I
makes
mean, maybe it
sense.
doesn't, and maybe he's just like, hey, hey, I got you now. But I felt like it was a little bit of a suspicious thing to be saying.
I agree. I even noted it because it's to his disadvantage to alert her that there's poison, right? Because
Yes.
the idea is that the poison would take effect relatively quickly. So then obviously she can't attack him. Then he and his men can take her to a separate
Hmm.
location and interrogate her. So he really shows his hand in a stupid way. So the only explanation would be it's intentional, like you said, or he's just so arrogant that he doesn't think she's capable of overpowering him. But either way, it was stupid of him.
Oh, absolutely. Call me crackhead if you want. I realize this probably is.
Always.
But Archer specifically being like, Arabin's not here tonight. Davis using Gloriella, the same stuff that was used on her the night that she was captured and betrayed. Could it be possible that Archer is also somehow connected? Well, not Archer, but even Davis. Are they connected to Arabin somehow?
Oh,
And
I
maybe
think
this
it's
was
totally
all this,
possible.
like maybe this, the whole thing of just getting her into his office even was part of a way to lure her and get her
Oh.
captured and stuff, because Davis arrives very quickly into that room.
He
We don't
does.
know exactly how long she's been in there, but it seems to be
Mhm.
within 10 minutes or so, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, we know Airbin knows Archer because remember, Archer trained at the Assassin's Keep. So
right.
he has to have some kind of connection to Airbin.
Hmm.
See, I took it a different direction and I thought of it more as Archer is setting Celaena up to be killed because it would be very convenient for him if Celaena just disappeared because she's the only one who is threatening him at this time, so he could hypothetically get out of having to flee and or, being murdered. But now that you're saying it, I think what you're saying makes more sense.
Well, even if he was setting Selena up, though, I just don't
Mhm.
know why he would do that, because he wants to be free, right? And in a way, Selena's offer to him is
Does
kind
he?
of his. Maybe,
Does
I
he
mean,
really wanna be free?
maybe he doesn't want to be
Because
free, and that's the whole thing. But to me, I'm
yeah,
like, why wouldn't you take that? That would, in his words, literally be a blessing, quote unquote, right?
right,
Because
but
if people think you're dead, you are no longer indebted to this woman who pimped you out when you were 12 years old. Like, I
but
don't know.
why can't he do that any other time? Why didn't he do that a year ago or a week ago or a month ago? Why couldn't he
Huh?
take his money and run away? So it's
That's
like,
true.
does he really want to be free? Because there's nothing stopping him from doing exactly what he's doing right now. He's only doing it because Selena said I'll kill you or leave.
That's
So
true. Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot there that I feel that we need a lot more scenes with Archer to
Figure out
sort
what
of
he's
dive into his character, but he's up to something.
something. Yeah. No, no bueno. As I mentioned before, she's able to slice Davis's throat and she does make it out. Now, this part I found a little funny because somehow she runs miles back to the glass castle and stumbles into Kale's room
Yeah.
without anything happening to her. She's like in the city, and the glass castle is presumably
Hmm.
a good few miles out in the distance. And she runs the whole way. And I was like, all right,
It's a
you
little
go, girl.
odd.
But she does make it back to the castle unharmed, and she didn't run into a single guard. So, whew, smooth sailing for her, kind of. All right, everyone. We are now on our last chapter to analyze, chapter 13. So, of course, Kale jumps right into action and he's helping Selena recover. And we get some insight into his thoughts, which for sure indicate that he probably loves Selena.
He
Not his words,
does.
our words. But
We're putting
heavily
them in his
implied.
mouth. Yeah.
Heavily implied. So
Yes,
some of his
yes.
thoughts include it was one of the longest nights of Kale's life, and then every second passed with horrific clarity. So he'd lost it, utterly lost it.
Lost it.
And then Kale also rips open Celaena's dress to check and see
Yeah,
if
he
she's
did.
bleeding. But I was
Yeah.
like, he would
I'll
have
take
liked
it.
what he saw.
He probably still did. He was just a little too worried to focus on it.
Exactly. As Kale does his job, he informs his guards to keep quiet about the events. He fetches a healer to provide an antidote for the Gloriella. And then he also has sent out his guards to gather information about what actually went down because he doesn't know at this point, right? As he figures out and pieces together what actually happened to Celaena, he has a thought where he says he was glad Davis was dead because if Davis had survived, Kale would have gone back to finish the job himself.
Yes, yes. I noted that too. And I put a little asterisk that says more evidence that maybe we're getting a little bit of a shadow daddy KL. Okay. Because that's a
Ooh.
very morally gray thing to
Oh,
feel
yeah.
and think, Yeah.
Well, especially because we have this change where Kale at first is really bent out of shape about killing Cain, but now he's fully like, I will kill for you.
Yes. He's like, I will end anyone who dares harm a hair on your head.
But of course, also, we realize that part of the reason why he's also doing this is because he does realize that it would not be good if the king hears about this because it would be damning for Celaena. So he's trying to piece it all together. Later on, Celaena is recovering and she wakes up sometime around dawn in her own bed. And she notices that Kale's been sleeping in the chair watching over her. Kale wakes up and he asks, "How are you feeling?" And asks her point blank if she killed Davis because she was caught snooping. I don't remember exactly what she said. I don't have the quote, but she answers, "Yeah, I did that." And then she says, "Are you going to tell the king?" Kale says, "No, because I don't feel like having to argue. You're still capable of spying without getting caught. But the next time you do anything like this, I'm going to throw you in the dungeons." Kale then informs her that they burned her dress to cover up any evidence of what happened. Celaena obviously notes that and says, "You could get in trouble for covering me like this." And Kale says, "I'll deal with it if it comes to that." My thoughts around all of this was that first, Kale was truly very concerned about Celaena's well being. And then this also seems to be a pretty big shift in Kale's allegiance. So I feel pretty sure that this is going to be potentially another point of conflict for Kale internally. But the fact that he is choosing to save Celaena and keep it a secret from the king is pretty major.
Agreed.
I'm wondering, is Celaena going to eventually let him in on what she's doing? Or honestly, is Kale just going to figure it out himself?
That seems more likely to me than Celaena telling him, because one thing we know about Celaena is she will do anything to protect the people that she loves and cares about, and it really is too risky for her to tell Kale. If you recall, way back in Throne of Glass, that scene where she's on her period and he goes in there to talk to her, it's just after the 500 Ilway rebels have been slaughtered. He's talking about their friendship with Nehemia, and he thinks it's good, and he's been thinking about all these things, and he gets cuts off. And we talked about that conversation because it never got finished. And so I think that planted the seeds for the idea that Kale is going to have this existential crisis about his loyalty, because we know that one of Kale's absolutely core traits is that he is loyal to a fault. But I think this is the beginning of his loyalty shifting allegiances, not necessarily away from the king, but more aligned with what's actually good and true and right.
And obviously, it seems more than likely that he definitely was like, "Why were you in Davis's room? You weren't supposed to be snooping about him. You were supposed to be looking at Archer. So how did you end up there?" Right. And Kale's obviously smart. So he gonna figure it out. I'm pretty sure. Ultimately, the question in that case would become, will he help Celaena go to that side, or will he, despite all of it, stay loyal to the king? I suspect he'll probably shift, but you never know.
I think that's going to be a big part of his storyline, is him conflating undying loyalty with what is morally right, and being able to align a defection from his loyalty to follow his moral compass. Chaos seems primed for that kind of storyline.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
At the end of this chapter, Celaena's final thought was she'd hardly known where she was going when the Gloriella tore through her. All she'd known was that she had to get someplace safe. And somehow she had wound up exactly where she knew she'd be safest.
I had that exact same quote highlighted. I
So
said,
cute.
with Kale, it's with Kale. As happy as I am because I love Kale and I love Kale with Celaena, I really am happy to see that they have a really developed relationship, right? It's
Hmm.
not just the romantic interest, but it's that it has a really solid foundation. They genuinely care for each other. They get each other. They have each other's back. And because nothing romantic has happened between them, right?
Hmm.
But ultimately, even in Celaena's subconscious, she knew that regardless of the circumstances, because she knew Kale wouldn't be happy, she still knew that he would take care of her no matter what.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm happy.
Agreed. Anyways, that is all for our analysis. Before we end the episode, of course, we have our favorite moments to share. Do you want to go first or should I go first?
I'll go ahead and go. All right. So the entire scene where Kale and Celaena go into Rifthold and they accidentally run into Archer, I just think that their banter is so flirty and funny. And I don't know why I'm broken in this way, but I like that they mean flirt with each other. It was like when you're in elementary school and when the boy would pull your hair and they're like, oh, it's because he likes you.
Mhm.
That's the vibe it gives. Obviously, I don't really support that kind of flirting in real life, but for the book, I'm like, that's so cute. I don't
It
know
does have
why,
that
but
very young, juvenile love
yeah.
feel to it,
Oh
like
my
middle
gosh.
schoolers flirting with each other. Yeah.
Yes. That is a perfect way to describe it, honestly. Yes.
Or high schoolers, I guess. It's more accurate, but
I don't know. Middle school seems about right.
okay.
Honestly. I also liked the scene where Nehemia and Celaena are having breakfast in bed together. I just thought that was sweet. It's just a very best friend thing to do. So when I
Yeah.
come visit you, I think we should have breakfast in bed together like Nehemia and Celaena.
And we can
And
record a podcast as
yes.
we're eating some
Oh,
bacon.
that would be so fun. And then I was just gonna say, I like when Fleetfoot swipes the bacon and stares
Yep.
Lena down. So we can
Yeah.
let your dog swipe some bacon from the tray and recreate that moment.
Bernie and Kelso are going to be so happy about that.
Oh, I know. I'm sure they'll be devastated if we have to do multiple takes of that too.
God forbid.
And then my last favorite moment is when Selena's in the carriage with Archer. And she tells him the king has sent me to kill you because he thinks you're a traitor. And Archer says, I'm not part of any movement. Word damn me. I might be a whore, but I'm not a traitor. And I don't know why, but I just thought that line was so funny. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just a whore, okay? Nothing more. I would never betray the king. Like, that's your
Yeah.
defense. That's
It's
where
kind of
you're
like
gonna go.
the I'm just a girl or like I'm just
Yeah.
a baby. I'm just
I'm
a
just
boy.
a baby. I can pay you in blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
That was
that's
just really
funny.
funny. He's just
That
Ken,
is.
you know?
Yep. Exactly. So I had the exact same one about Fleetfoot. Again, I have dogs, and she's like, "You brazen thief!" And she jumps right in there and like swips the bacon. I just felt the description of how she stole the bacon was funny. And then I also found all the spicy looks and words between Archer and Celaena to be very enticing to read. And I have one of his quotes. So the sound of his voice was enough to make her skin heat, but the look in his eyes as he said it, the curve of that divine mouth, he was a weapon too, a beautiful, deadly weapon.
Woo! It's getting hot in here.
Yes. All right. So my next favorite moment was, of course, Kale's caring quote on page 89, where he's has his whole spiel about how he cares about her. And he says, I will always tell you to be careful because I will always care what happens. Just so cute. Very lovely on Kale's part. And
Agreed.
then my last favorite moment from these set of chapters was just the whole snooping and murder scene with Lord Davis. I just felt like it was very exciting and it was
Yeah.
a very solid action scene. So,
Yes, totally agree. It makes me excited because if we're getting this much action this early in the book, what is the ending going to be like? Because remember in Throne of Glass, nothing really happens until that last 50,
Yes.
60 pages. And I'm like, ooh, if shit's already popping off here, where are we going to go? So I'm very excited for reading.
Yes, I feel like we're gonna get a lot more missions because obviously the king has other targets and whatnot. So I'm sure we're gonna get some other interesting things happening. But yeah, those were all of my favorite moments, and that is the end of our episode. Yay! Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Book Not Fantasy Podcast. As always, we would love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, or share it with all your friends. You can also keep up with us on a daily basis by following us on social media, and all of those are linked in the episode description below. That's all we've got for you guys today, so stay nerdy, everyone, and we'll catch you next week for Crown of Midnight episode 3. Bye!
Bye.
And then, of course, finally, but not least, Addison, or wait, hold on. Finally, but not least, that didn't make any sense. And then
she finally falls into a deep sleep and cable. That's new. That's
Kale the cable man.
Kale's cable service. Okay. Recording podcasts is so stupid. It's especially funny when you're like trying to be funny and you're like, I mess it up. Let me try again. You're like,
I need a retake.
I always mess up on the funny parts when I'm trying to be like cutesy. It has informed me that I am not meant to be an actress.
I think we discussed it earlier, but Archer works on behalf of a very influential. Archer works on behalf of a very influential. Do you say madam or madame?
It's a little crackhead. I don't think we're ready for that question. I think we need to find a little more. Man, you think it's so deep. Like they literally introduced the idea and you're like, you should write a book. You need to write a fantasy book, Lorraine, because you can do it. You can do it.